Good morning, good morning. I'd like to call to order the September MTA board meeting. Tom Quigley, do we have a quorum?
Mr. Chairman, based on the in-person attendance, I am pleased to say that we have a quorum. I would, however, like to check if any board members are attending remotely. I see a few on the screen, and I ask you, please turn your cameras on if you are a board member, and if you would, please indicate your attendance remotely. Commissioner
Billy
Tessitore?
Tessitore.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Commissioner Brinkman?
Gerard Brinkman.
Thank you. Are any other board members attending remotely? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We still have a quorum.
Okay. Before we hear from our public speakers, we'll have a brief safety announcement.
Your safety is of foremost importance to the MTA. Therefore, we ask that you listen to the following instructions. In the event of an emergency, notify emergency personnel in the room, and 911 should be called. If an alarm sounds, wait for a public address announcement and follow instructions. If told to go to another floor or to evacuate the building, leave all unessential items behind and use stairwell A just across the main hallway or stairwell D down the hallway past the elevators. An automated external defibrillator, AED, for use by trained personnel is in the main hallway just past the elevators. Thank you and have a safe day.
Thank you. I'd like folks to be aware that all of the public comments that were recorded, and we're doing this with both in-person public comment and recorded comments, all those comments that were recorded have been distributed to the board in advance. So let's hear from the public speakers who are present. Kate?
Good morning. We have 13 members of the public registered to speak here today. As a reminder, we ask that all of our public speakers adhere to the MTA rules of conduct and decorum. I would also like to remind our public speakers that in the interest of time and fairness to all, we limit everyone to 2 minutes. Please be aware of the clock at the front of the room and a warning light you will see reminding you when you have 30 seconds left to conclude your remark. The first speaker today will be Alita Dupree, followed by Jason Anthony.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair Jano, Lieber, and members. Alita Dupree for the record. My pronouns are she and her. It's always good to be back with you. Thank you for the welcome. I used the system again today. Good ride, kind of slow on the main line on Lexington, but it happens. We got to keep working on our Omni. Couldn't use my Metro card at 42nd Port Authority. Didn't swipe. I have Omni. It works. But if I were to use Omni for everything, it costs me about $100 a week because I use the system a lot. So we need to talk and work more on that. And I tend to come to you as user of many different systems. And I am simply an ordinary user of systems of public transportation. And I tend to speak to you with concepts and strategic thoughts, remembering that every swipe of a card and everyone who drives under our open road tolling system and everyone who pays subway tax has a story. Millions and millions of stories flow through our system every day. Every one of those is different. The diversity of our system, 153 nations represented by Omni, a system that serves not just people who lived here for decades. My grandmother lived to be 106. But people who simply stop by for an hour and want to get some lunch. Maybe they get off an Amtrak train. The system is for everyone. It's for me. And I'm a person who is very diverse. And remember always the traditions and history of our system. And it's relevant to the future and never a relic. To be legendary is not just about things, but people. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Jason Anthony, followed by Dan Bitterman.
Good morning.
Jason Anthony from the Amazon Labor Union. 48 hours has passed since I stood here in front of the Safety Committee. I requested something, right, Patrick Warren? I didn't receive an answer. Tim Minton, I sent you several tweets reminding you about something. Patrick Warren, Denman Shea, and Catherine O'Reilly, since that you guys had failed and not complied with the TSA mandate, you guys have to step down for your positions. I'm sorry, Neil, that I have to break the news to you this way, but it's the law. If CTA has it, New Jersey Transit has it, why not the MTA? Last night, a bus operator on the S40 didn't have his mask on. Several police officers coming out from the Whitehall Street station didn't have their mask on and unaware of the federal mandate. Pat Warren, your time is up. You should resign now, or every police officer
Please conclude
will
your
be
remarks.
reported to the TSA.
Please conclude your remarks. Thank you. The next speaker will be Dan Bitterman, followed by Kenneth Murray.
Hi, Dan Biederman, president of 34th Street Partnership and Bryant Park. Start with some compliments. Moynihan, your role in it, the LIRR, is a fantastic achievement. Not enough people in my community, Midtown Real Estate, have been in there. I'm telling them all they need to go and hang around and see what's doing there. It's being beautifully managed. It's a tremendous achievement. The old station across the street is better. The public doesn't know this yet for a reason I'm about to go into. But there aren't as many threatening people inside the old Penn Station. The plans to fix that are terrific, and they've been revealed in an endless series of meetings the community has been open to attending. I'm a former community board chairman 40 years ago. I strongly urge you to ignore the comments of community boards 4 and 5. They're completely out of control. Your plans are great. Jano presented them beautifully. This will be a much better station if you pursue them. What I'm here today to ask you to do, though, is think more about the streets around the station, because as you've pressured some of the misbehaving people, and the term people experiencing homelessness is really not the right one. These are generally drug addicts, people with severe mental illness. Housing has very little to do with it. And they're out on the streets threatening people in our community, and it's hurting the Return to New York movement. So what we'd like to do, and I have with me Kevin Ward, who's a former 3-star chief at PD, and he's working closely with your people, is to command the sidewalks around the station so that the people you've kind of pushed out are under control, because people have their experience of Penn Station not only within it, but also as they approach it. And that's a scary prospect right now, particularly for women. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Kenneth Murray, followed by Charles Muniz.
The Metropolitan Transit Authority is open full-time. Let us not give the customers of this city a part-time customer service experience. I am from the Stations Department. We need a balance. We need money in the booth, and we need to bring back the Wayfinder customer service program. Together as a team, working as a team, we have done the following. We have helped lost children find their parents. We have guided customers when there was a 12-9. Ladies and gentlemen, we are the Stations Department, and we are the first responders. So, 1, bring the money back to the booth. 2, please reinstate the Wayfinder program. You are the MTA board. Let's get this done.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Charles Muniz, followed by Lisa Daglian.
Good morning. My name is Charles Muniz. I'm an MTA employee and a member of the TWU Local 100 Union. In 2019, the MTA stated they lost $300 million in revenue due to fare evasion. How much have they lost since the pandemic? I estimate about $2 billion. What has the management done to prevent fare evasion or recoup losses? Nothing. You guys love to cry poverty, and the way you combat fare evasion is pulling Andy Byford's successful Wayfinder program and replacing it with do-nothing outside contractors wearing orange vests with the words MTA employee on the back. You remove money from the booths and try forcing the public to use Omni, which to this day the public has not accepted. You brought in non-union cleaners to do disinfecting, something MTA cleaners can do. You continue not to hire and have the public hate us for the dumb things you implemented. You keep throwing money at everyone except your employees. These employees you call heroes but treat like zeros. You write us up for the tiniest infractions but refuse to give us hazard pay, which we deserve. We were out there on the field getting sick and losing 170 of our coworkers while you millionaires stayed home. Last week when Hurricane Ida hit, we were out there doing our jobs. But did we get recognized for what we do? No. Now that the anti-union Governor Pervert is gone, I hope you guys start doing the right thing for the workers, and I suggest you start with a hazard pay. Thank you.
Next speaker will be Lisa Daglian, followed by Bradley Brashears.
Good morning. I'm Lisa Daglian, Executive Director of the Permanent Citizens Advisory Committee to the MTA PCAC. It's great to hear that riders are getting back on board in record-breaking numbers. It's been clear over the past weeks, and especially the past days, that there is new pep in people's step as they get back in routines that some left behind a year and a half ago. Things are different, no doubt, but what has remained a constant throughout these past intense months is our transit system: subways, buses, Staten Island Rail, Long Island Railroad, and Metro North. That's good news for riders. The bad news is the pandemic put the MTA's ambitious and much-needed FY 2024 capital program on pause for some time. Events and storms of the past week showed us just how critical some of the delayed work is to a more resilient transit system, and it's important the MTA catch up as expeditiously as possible. At yesterday's City Council hearing, the Transportation Chair raised the issue of delays to completion of Sandy projects at the 207th Street and Coney Island yards. There are several other Sandy-related projects that have also slipped schedule, and while we understand that COVID wreaked havoc with crews and supply chain, we also know how lucky we all were to have dodged more serious damage in those facilities from recent storms. However, Henri and Ida did show us that there are more new flooding emergencies and contingencies to plan for, particularly as we face increasing challenges from climate emergencies. The city has a lot of work ahead of it to address its deficiencies vis-a-vis storm drains and sewer pipes, but we saw too clearly the impact they have on the riding public and the MTA's systems, including its overworked pumps. The MTA and the city must take a close look at their capital programs in the context of resiliency and consider reprioritizing their projects. This will all take money. We're concerned that not enough funding has come for the FY 2024 plan, including from the state and city. But mostly, the importance of congestion pricing is glaringly clear. We will be speaking in support of it at the upcoming meetings and urge others to do so as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd also urge you to reinstate the cleaning routine
Please summarize
at
your remarks.
the podium in between the speakers. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Bradley Brashears, followed by Rachel Foss.
Good morning, board members. I'm Bradley Brashears, Planning Manager at the Permanent Citizens Advisory Committee to the MTA PCAC. I'm here to speak in support of expanding commuter rail discounts with transfers to subways and buses, as we detail in our forthcoming report, Freedom Ticket Phase 2. Building on Long Island Railroad's Atlantic Ticket Field Study, which has lowered commuter rail fares at 10 select Southeast Queens and Brooklyn stations, Freedom Ticket Phase 2 is needed now more than ever. The COVID-19 pandemic has changed travel dynamics and established the need for a more equitable system for riders. While commuter rail ridership numbers are breaking pandemic records daily, they are still less than half of pre-pandemic levels. And though riders are returning to the system faster than the forecast by McKinsey & Company, ridership is still expected to reach just 80 to 90% of pre-pandemic levels by 2024. Even as the region reopens and more people return to school and work, hybrid schedules will likely be the new norm, further compounding changing travel times and patterns. The board has signaled interest in restructuring fares to promote equity and help get riders back on board while bringing in much-needed revenue for the MTA. This model already exists within the Atlantic Ticket program, which provides weekly ticket options with transfers to subways and buses for the low price of $60, a 44% fare reduction when factoring in both commuter rail and subway fares. This allows thousands in Southeast Queens to reduce their once 2-hour one-way commutes to just 45 minutes. Riders elsewhere in our region deserve the same options. From our pre-pandemic analysis, we know there are available seats. Ongoing review continues to prove that to be true. Expansion projects like Eastside Access, Long Island Railroad's third track, and Penn Station Access will provide even more available capacity and flexibility. The PCAC strongly recommends 3 overarching actions. 1, make the Atlantic Ticket program permanent and improve marketing and purchasing options. 2, expand Freedom Ticket discounts with subway and bus transfers to all city commuter rail stations for both railroads. And 3, provide off-peak and reverse peak discount pilot programs in the suburbs as well. We believe Freedom Ticket will be good for riders, good for the region, and good for the MTA. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Rachel Foss, followed by Finley Staub.
Good morning. My name is Rachel Foss, and I'm the Senior Research Analyst for reInvent Albany. We advocate for more transparent and accountable New York government, including for authorities like the MTA. First, as the MTA continues to hold public meetings during COVID, we would like to thank the board and staff for allowing public comments both in person and remotely. We believe the MTA is ahead of the curve here, and we are holding up the MTA as a best practice for hybrid public meetings. What the MTA does going forward with its meetings may set a standard for other government agencies. We like citing the MTA as a leader, and we ask that you allow remote public comment to be provided in real time for your October meeting. Much can happen in one day, and it does not make sense to have comments delivered in person be real time like mine today, while remote comments must be recorded a day early. Second, we ask the MTA to provide open data regarding its vaccination rates of its workforce, disaggregated by type of worker, including front-facing employees, public police officers, etc., building off of board member Neil Zuckerman's request at Monday's Safety Committee meeting. We note that when this information was requested by a reporter in July for MTA police officers, it was stated it would be a HIPAA violation. We do not agree, as making aggregate information available regarding public workers does not concern HIPAA, and the MTA already provides vaccination data by agency. reInvent Albany and other watchdog groups sent a letter to Governor Hochul earlier this month asking that all COVID-19 data be made available as open data. Greater transparency regarding COVID-19, including employee vaccination rates, will help restore trust in government and help researchers, journalists, and the public better understand the dire pandemic that has cost us loved ones and colleagues and continues to upend everyday life. Third, we also hope and expect that the MTA will participate in Governor Hochul's work to expedite FOIL requests and post the completed FOIL requests online, as announced in her very first speech as governor. We called for this in our Open MTA report, which was released in 2019. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Finley Staub, followed by Cassandra Rafucci.
Good morning, MTA board. Good morning, Sarah. Good morning, Jano. Good morning, Neil. Good morning, Phil. And most importantly, good morning, Larry. Larry. You weren't supposed to be here on Monday. Multiple members of the press on Twitter, including myself, would like to know the answer to this simple question, and you don't need to answer it. When are you going to leave the board? I'm just curious, that's all. I was handing out masks to people at Penn Station last week, and a woman came up to me while walking up the stairs from tracks 22 and tracks 20 and 22 and asked me, why aren't you guys on the trains giving out fines to people that aren't wearing masks on the trains? Which I simply replied, because it's not within my power to enforce it. Phil, my man, please do something to address mask enforcement on the trains. Please. Sarah, from what I've seen, you have been under abuse and was verbally assaulted by commuters while handing out masks at stations recently. I'm truly sorry that you have been under this kind of abuse from people. I honestly wish I could do something to help you out by any means. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Cassandra Raffucci, followed by Michael Cohen.
Good morning, Chairman Lieber and MTA board members. My name is Cassie Rafushi. I'm a private citizen of Coney Island, Brooklyn. I am getting so sick and tired of every time I take the train, I constantly see riders not wearing any mask. I would like to see more enforcement on riders to please wear masks when riding in the transit system, which includes Metro North, Long Island Railroad, trains and buses, and Staten Island Railway. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Michael Cohen, followed by Omar Vera.
Good morning, MTA board. My name is Michael Cohen, and I have this to say. The escalators sometimes don't work at the stations where the steps to the platform can be a long distance, and it really sucks having to go down a lot of stairs to reach the platform. I would love it if they put some sort of sensor on the escalators to make sure that they knew when they're not working, and I would love it if there was a website where you could track which escalators were working, which ones weren't, and when they would get fixed, and there is a program to fix the elevators and escalators more often. Also, I have to note this. I feel the subway cleaning and bus cleaning isn't that great as it should be during the COVID pandemic, and I feel that cleaning efforts should really be done better and should be stepped up and should be more accurate cleaning, because when I'm standing around on the subway or bus and I see someone's gum wrapper or someone's something on the floor, I'm thinking about this is spreading COVID. I'm thinking people can get sick because these buses aren't clean or these trains aren't clean, and they totally should be cleaner, and there should be more of an effort to get them clean and to get them disinfected and to have procedures to make things safer for everyone riding the buses. And, it'd be great if you had dispensers for the masks they have on the buses on the subway too, or something even better than that, so that people can get masks in the station so that they can have the masks they need when they ride the trains and they're trying to get to work. So that's what I think about that. Also, bring back the catch and token booths.
Please summarize your remarks. Thank you.
Kate, may I ask you to ask the public speakers to speak up and stay close to the mic? I think we're having a little trouble hearing them.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, please be sure to speak directly into your microphone. Our next speaker will be Omar Vera, followed by Charlton D'Souza.
Good morning, MTA board. Welcome to the September edition of your full board meeting. First, let me thank Sarah Meyer for the masks. I like these masks. Thanks for giving them over the summer. The bus one's at home, so I got the subway one. Second, like I said Monday, I also like to congratulate General Lieber on his role at as the MTA chair and CEO. At least for the time being, he can lead us to greatness. Third, we need to also discuss about the infrastructure, but like I discussed Monday, because after the storms after the damage from Henri and Ida, we need a big upgrade, and this is our time to support President Biden's infrastructure bill. This will benefit us greatly. So, gotta keep the push there. Fourth, the Omni. Keep the Omni rollouts. I'm waiting for the Omni fare card so I can have unlimited rides using Omni, because it's time for the MetroCard to go. But now I want to go to something a little bit more serious. Monday, I sent a letter to Larry Schwartz detailing his behavior towards, in general. I believe he owes Rachel Faust an apology for accurately pointing out then Chair Joe Loda's conflict of interest. He falsely accused her of character assassination. That was uncalled for. The letter also discussed other things, but I'm not going to go discuss it since the point is, we're here to discuss the board. So, every now and then, well, with that said, I'm going to yield the balance of my time because I at least have to say what I have to say. But thank you all for here, and I'll see you all soon.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Charlton D'Souza.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Charlton D'Souza, President of Passengers United. And I have to say, I agree with the PCAC on the Atlantic ticket. Right now, we need the Atlantic ticket extended to Penn Station full-time. Would be great. If you could do it overnight for now, get it done. You guys have the power. And also, the machines at Queens Village and Hollis are not working. Those machines need to be working all the time. Now, yesterday, I want to say something that we don't see any police in the subway system. And the few officers we do see are very busy. So we need more police, especially for the winter, you know. And I would say to the governor, bring in 300 National Guard troops to get law and order underground. You have 150 troops during the day, 150 on the night shift. So like this, you can have law and order underground. And also, yesterday, I saw 15 police officers at Elmhurst Avenue, and they were guarding Riders Alliance and their press conference. And the press conference was upstairs, but they didn't come downstairs. So 15 police officers that could have been used to provide security were instead put down there. And I would like to know who authorized that. And I have to say, I am so proud of our NYPD or MTA police officers. They're doing a great job. And again, Sarah, I'm sorry about the person who screamed at you when you were giving out masks. But every time when we try to tell people to wear their mask, they curse you out. They throw things at you. Like yesterday, a guy took out a beer can and he threw a beer can across the car because a lady told him to put his mask on. This is the stuff we deal with every day on the Queens Boulevard line. And we need social workers. We need, 400 social workers in the subways because the situation for the last 2 weeks has gotten really bad. And I was on an E-train where a guy was punching everyone on the face,
Please summarize
So
your
we need
remarks.
help. We need help now. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now hear from members of the public who commented virtually.
Good morning. We have 4 speakers for virtual public comment. Our first speaker is CN, followed by Miriam Fisher.
Good morning, Chairman of the Board. It's come to my attention that the eHealth On Demand program will be scrapped at the end of the year. It is shocking that the rationing of rides will not be implemented. Even though I'm not in favor of rationing rides, at least it's better than no program at all. How about prorating rides where you could have the first 10 rides in a month free, and then the next 10 rides where the passenger pays 10% of the cost, and then after that, the next 10 rides could be 20% of the total cost. There are places like the Edge in New York City and Summit One, which will be opening at the end of October, which has accessibility ambassadors because they're thinking about accessibility, they're thinking about the disabled community. I have even had success with the 34th Street Partnership and the president of the Times Square Alliance, who have provided me with assistance from my eHealth On Demand taxi to enjoy New York City's wonderful cultural events in Bryant Park and Times Square. That's why this program is so important. It is vital and essential, and I think it is a landmark program which should survive because, ladies and gentlemen, this is your legacy. This is a legacy for future generations of New Yorkers with disabilities to have a paratransit service in real time. And it's really important. And I know you guys are trying your best. You're making subway stations accessible, but not everyone with a disability has the same independence. And just highlighting last month, a man in a wheelchair ended up in the subway tracks. So please, I really beg you guys, please keep this very important program alive. Maybe we could find some other ways of keeping it alive, but it's really, really important. People with disability matter, and it's really important for New York. I do believe. Let's not go backwards. Let's go forwards. And again, this is your legacy to really make a difference, to really change paratransit. and really be a beacon of hope and light across this country to other states and other paratransit companies. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Miriam Fisher, followed by Iman Ramawi.
I'm going to speak also about accessibility and encouraging return to the subway. All the benches have been removed months ago on 23rd and 6th Avenue in Chelsea on the M&F lines. The MTA first said this was for cleaning, later admitted it's to discourage the homeless who congregate in this area, 23rd and 6th Avenue. I don't know if this will be visible. This is the one bench for everybody for the whole station. And this is another picture. I don't know how visible it is of the whole station. No place to sit. People need to sit. People with disabilities need to sit. Bad backs, knees, seniors, pregnant women. This is the same station that was closed for months. A year or two ago for renovation, no elevators were added. It's the same physical block as the Sellis Manor, which is a residence and center for people with disabilities and visual impairments. There are other stations that have benches removed. I know of Lexington and 53rd on the M&F line. I don't know others, though I'm convinced there are. I only know the ones that I frequent. People need to sit, people need benches. Please put them back. The other is encouraging return to the subway and trust and safety. There's been no monitoring that I've ever seen on the stations that I've frequented during the pandemic, nobody checking for compliance, selective enforcement. I've changed seats many times to distance myself from a non-mask rider next to me, talking without a mask and breathing on me. The city, the Digital Journal, Jose Martinez, September.
Please conclude your remarks.
Reported that there have been no fines at all in August. I suggest not the NYPD program equivalent to de Blasio's proposal of city cleaning corps.
Please conclude your remarks.
I'm finishing. Last sentence. Hire the unemployed, the homeless, teens as monitors. People need to feel safe on the subway with the virus, again, spreading. Thank you for listening.
Our next speaker is Iman Ramawi, followed by Andy Pollack.
Thank you. My name is Iman Ramawi, and I am the Access Right Coordinator and Organizer in the Disability Justice Program and New York Lawyers for the Public Interest. I want to start by saying thank you for reinstating the virtual option for these meetings. It is vitally important to have that option available for everyone, and we really appreciate you having heard our pleas. As of today, there are 1.05 million cases of COVID infections and 34,001 COVID-related deaths in New York City alone. That number is very close to the 15% of the reinstated shared rides, which is 25,500 accessorized customers being put in harm's way because of the reinstatement of shared rides. I was deeply troubled by Camilo Arroyo's statement in the article published in City and State on August 31st, where he said, "I think it's inherently flawed to think that the paratransit riders are immunocompromised. People with disabilities and our 150,000 plus paratransit riders run the gamut on demographics. What is inherently flawed is Arroyo said what he said. In fact, most accessorized customers are over 65 based on the MTA dashboard, and age is a prominent cause for having a compromised immune system. Other common causes of chronic illness and diseases such as diabetes and rheumatoid arthritis, treatments for such conditions is cancer and organ implants and smoking. I have lupus and a compromised immune system. Most of the people I talk to on a daily basis who use Accessoride have a compromised immune system. You can't say that's inherently flawed. That is inherently flawed, that statement. You say that you are safe enough and people are wearing masks and they're supposed to wear masks. I had a shared ride 2 weeks ago and one of the customers wouldn't fix her mask, even though I politely asked her to do so. Check out the pictures I took of her on my Twitter feed. I also had a driver this morning who refused to wear a mask. You can say people are wearing masks all you want, but what we're seeing on the ground is something completely different. I am very worried about shared rides, especially if accessoride drivers aren't mandated to get vaccinated and some accessoride customers can't or won't get vaccinated. How are you okay with being careless with my life? Does my life and the lives of everyone else who uses accessoride doesn't count to you? Hashtag no shared rides, hashtag we don't want to die. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Andy Pollack.
Good morning, Chairman Lieber, members of the board. So before I get to my main points, I'd just like to bring up the face mask here. I'd like to remind everyone, because the TSA has extended the mask requirement on all public transportation until January 15th of 2022. So let's hope we can get to that point where we can look forward to that day where we can take the mask off. But anyhow, I want to get to a couple changes. First, thank you for reinstating the 2:11 p.m. train from Penn to Long Beach. It now gives commuters an additional train in the 2 o'clock hour for an express option to the air train to JFK. Also, please do not go through with any bus redesigns. I was very pleased to hear in AM New York that there's going to be no proper plan until 2026, but there should be no redesigns, none whatsoever, not appropriate. Also, I talk about a couple changes with the board. I'm very happy to see General Lieber as chairman, very happy to see Craig Cipriano as president of New York City Transit. But we are still waiting to hear from Governor Hochul on who will stay and who will go, because she can't appoint new board members. So we're going to have to wait to see what the result of that will be. One more point I'm going to make this morning is I like these virtual options because I actually work on Monday and Wednesdays and I can't go to Lower Manhattan. I have a very important job in Queens because at my nursing home, we're very short staffed right now. So please keep these virtual options because it's convenient for me. It's convenient for everybody else who may not want to travel into Lower Manhattan. So thank you all very much. I hope to speak to you all again in October. Take care.
Chair Lieber, that concludes public comment.
Thank you, Kate, and thank you to all the members of the public who have come to share their thoughts with us, and those who pre-recorded it as well. As was made clear, all of the comments that were pre-recorded are available to the board online, and that's going to be a policy that we're going to make permanent, making sure that information is available to the board anytime they want to see it. And we're going to also make sure that if we run out of time for some reason, even for public comment, that those messages are recorded as well. We're trying to do more because public comment has become such an important feature of our board work. I'm going to give a few remarks, and then we're going to ask the agency presidents to talk because this is really about, we're at that moment where ridership and service is really has to be the focus. Thank you to everybody for joining us for today's board meeting. I'm not new to these board meetings, but this is my first go-around as acting chair and CEO, which I have to say, for a New York kid who grew up taking the bus to school with my brother starting when I was 7 years old, I can say truly is an enormous honor. I've been a regular rider, and I'm a passionate fan, like so many of the people we hear from at these board meetings, and I've been that way for a long time. Before we get started, I want to acknowledge the milestone anniversary that just passed, which is the 20-year anniversary of the September 11th attacks. Every year we acknowledge the 3,000 lives lost and the heroism of our brave first responders, but we don't always recognize the role that the MTA employees played in the aftermath of the 9/11 attacks, not only in their normal job of keeping the city moving, but as emergency responders themselves, helping to clear debris, to recover survivors from the rubble, delivering a ton of safety equipment to Ground Zero, and protecting and rebuilding the stations that ran right through the middle of the World Trade Center site. These employees deserve recognition and thanks, along with the other heroes of that terrible episode. And I want to say, for me, having spent so much time on the World Trade Center rebuilding, I will never forget their service, and we at the MTA should do the same. Our city and region have faced a different crisis in 2020 and 2021. But I personally have no doubt that we're going to come back stronger than ever, and the recovery will be led by the MTA. We have a great team. We've hit the ground running, thanks to close collaboration with the board and with the governor's office. I've gotten to work closely with Governor Hochul over the last few weeks on finding lasting solutions after the RCC outage, and of course on Hurricane Ida, on the storm that came with Hurricane Ida. She has already shown herself to be a strong and seasoned leader who is deeply personally interested in what we at the MTA are doing. I want to take a moment now to thank our workforce for their efforts during the storm that Hurricane Ida dropped on us back on September 1st. That was a historic weather event that really tested the MTA system, all of it. But in the end, we came through for New York. The most important thing, of course, is that we kept all of our passengers safe. But people will always remember how our heroic bus drivers provided a lifeline for thousands of people who would have been otherwise stranded, and how subway and commuter rail systems rebounded really, really quickly. It's almost a miracle, but on that Thursday morning, a few hours after the rain stopped, we actually ran rush hour service. Sure, it was truncated and imperfect, but we got hundreds of thousands of people where they were going, and within a day, service was restored on all but one line. As I said, buses ran close to full volumes right through the storm and on the day after. Long Island Railroad, credit to Phil, Rob Free, and the team, was running on most branches by afternoon after the storm, and and Metro North reopened the Harlem and New Haven lines by Friday, even with all the mudslides. Pretty impressive. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you to your team. Demetrius Critchlow on Monday at the committee meeting went through some of the finer points about the experience in the subways, how we pumped out 75 million gallons of water after that record 3.5 inches of rain fell in just 1 hour. The flooding was dramatic. We all saw the videos on social media. But I want to emphasize that our system actually worked as designed. You heard me say it many times. The subway system is not a submarine, with literally tens of thousands of openings, vents, grates, adjacent private buildings, and 1 million holes made by utilities and street infrastructure which poke into the concrete, broken sidewalks. The system cannot be made impervious to water. It was not designed that way. It is a shallow trench. But we can withstand water, and we do pump it out quickly. The issue is that all of that water had to end up in the city's sewer system, storm sewer system, which was overwhelmed by the storm. And some of our lines, especially the 123 line, the 7th Avenue line in lower Manhattan, actually were slower to come back because we were pumping like crazy, but the storm sewer system literally couldn't accept more water. So it's clear that we do need to work with the city on strategies for addressing our system's vulnerability to climate change. And we are. One of my first actions when I moved upstairs to take on this job was to reactivate a lapsed task force that brought our professionals together with city government partners at City DEP, DOT, and Office of Emergency Management. First, we're identifying stations where there's most vulnerability to flooding. We already have a decent handle on that, and we're coming up with plans about how to attack it quickly. And we're looking at short-term solutions. But this group is also being tasked to look at how we can improve the situation so that the city's street-level drainage system can capture more of the water rather than letting it flow down into our system. Also, MTA is going to be developing plans that will be included in the 20-year needs assessment. Frederica Cuenca is here, who's leading that effort, and to be included in our next capital program, at least for your consideration and the legislature and the governors as well. With extreme weather events becoming more and more frequent, this clearly has to be a major priority for the agency. But through all of this, people need to remember that mass transit itself is the antidote to the threat posed by global warming and climate change. Our services, what we do here, allow all New Yorkers to lead more carbon-efficient lives by getting millions of people out of personal vehicles. So the mission is clear. We have to protect from climate change, but we are also part of the answer in the big picture. Stay tuned for a lot more activity on this front with the board in the future. Nope. Everything we do goes, nope. Let's go back to Welcome Back New York. There you go. Everything we do goes back to our core mission post-COVID, winning back ridership. I'm going to give a brief overview, but Craig, Phil, Kathy, and Danny are going to have developed comprehensive strategies, and they'll be sharing those in a few minutes. We're going from strength to strength. On Monday, as you may have heard, the subways, Long Island Railroad, and Metro North all broke pandemic-era ridership records. The subways, for example, carried just under 2.8 million customers. But here's a news flash for today. The news came in. Yesterday, we broke a record again. We had 2.92 million customers on the subways. That's a new high. That's a new high by 150,000 customers. This is really moving, folks. It's amazing news. New Yorkers are resuming all kinds of normal activities, traveling to schools and offices, taking in Broadway shows. I was with some costume characters of The Lion King, incredibly fun yesterday. They're going to restaurants, they're going to ball games, they're going to live theater, and they trust the MTA to get them where they're going. We all know the system is safe. 70% of our workforce is vaccinated. I'm sympathetic to the issues raised, and I'm frequently distributing masks on the subways when I ride, and I actually have found a lot of people have just forgotten in that era where people stopped wearing masks as much. A lot of folks got out of the habit, and many people, from me at least, there are some grouches, but a lot of folks, I'd say the majority, actually accept a mask and comply. But the system is safe. 70% of our workforce is vaccinated. Mask usage remains high, and our subways have much better ventilation systems than restaurants and offices. That can't be overlooked as well. And we know from studies about Europe and Asia, which are places where transit ridership has rebounded to much higher levels than it has in the United States, that mass transit has not been a vector for transmission of the virus, where people are wearing masks and where vaccination rates are moving quickly, like in New York. While ridership is down, we also knocked out a ton of capital work, so riders are also returning to a much improved MTA system. Last week, we had the opportunity to open the new 42nd Street shuttle. It's an amazing project. You'll hear more about it later. Some of our board members were with us. But we used that event also to launch a new marketing campaign to welcome riders back to the system. It highlights that mass transit is the best way to get around town and to take part in everything New York has to offer. So back to mask compliance and promoting mask usage. I mentioned that compliance remains pretty high, and it's trending upwards after a slight dip in the summer. That's all great news. The mask force, the MTA mask force, is going strong. We've distributed, almost over 800,000 masks to date, and that continues. Robust cleaning, which we started at the beginning of the pandemic and which our riders have come to expect, is also continuing in stations, on trains, buses, and other MTA vehicles. It's a 24/7 operation, and hundreds of stations, train cars, thousands of train cars and buses are being cleaned throughout the day. But the best incentive of all that we can offer customers is great service. It's no secret that this summer we faced an uptick in cancellations due to staff shortages. But let me just emphasize, we are, even with those days when we feel those impacts, we're running 95% of our pre-COVID service for, roughly 50% of the passengers. So we want to get every train on the rails and moving, but this is strong service that we're providing. But Craig Cipriano and the other agency presidents are developing strategies that attack the problem, and you're going to hear about that as well. I want everyone to bear on this crew shortages issue, bear a couple things in mind. One is that staff shortages we're facing are really no different than things that are happening throughout our economy. The MTA is not exempt from what's going on. But two, let's not have amnesia. Let's remember that the hiring freeze was the responsible thing to do at the moment, at the beginning of COVID, when we did not know, we were losing $200 million a week. We did not know what was coming from Washington. It was a different presidential administration. It was a different Congress. And we didn't know what we were going to have to work with. So we are recovering from the impact of that hiring freeze. But let's not forget why it came into being. We're also not just improving, the staffing, but we can improve speed of service and deliver shorter travel times. During the pandemic, MTA Construction and Development installed 900 signal relays that will help cut down on unnecessary slowdowns on our trains. I've revived the Subway Speed Task Force to resume digging up strategies to speed travel. There's a lot of work going on that, and Kathy at Metro North is looking at options for shortening run times across the Metro North system as well. On the bus front, we're an area where we chronically hear about speed of service as an issue. We made huge strides through a package of initiatives that New York City Commissioner of Transportation Hank Gutman and I announced last month. More bus lanes, more busways than ever before, more bus lane cameras, improved bus lane enforcement, the key to getting buses moving, and expanded transit signal priority. This is going to make a huge difference, and it also signals a new era of collaboration between the MTA and key city partners. Restarting our bus network redesigns is another priority. The Staten Island route redesign has been a huge success. Buses in the borough now travel about 10% faster, which saves Midtown-headed commuters about an hour a week. We want to replicate that success across the system, starting with the Bronx. And another imperative is revisiting our fare structure. This is an area where I'm going to work closely with the board. Commuting patterns have changed, and we need to come up with some ticketing options that better reflect this reality. The MTA staff have started studying those options, and as I said, we're going to engage with the board, which has the ultimate say. But one thing that can't wait is discounts for lower income riders. David Jones has really broken an important path here, your colleague on the board. We're teaming up, following David's footsteps, we're teaming up with New York City to double enrollment in the Fair Fares program in the next year. And I want to thank David for his enormous and visionary work on this. On the commuter railroads, we're also focused on fares and giving our riders a deal. We've extended off-peak fares through the end of the year, which will save riders, depending on what ticket they purchased before, up to 40% as compared to the normal price. And we're also trying out new promotions to entice customers on weekends. Phil and Kathy have been very strong on that front. No stone is going to go unturned to try to incentivize riders to get back on the system. But where commuting patterns on mass transit may have changed, traffic patterns, alas, have not. Congestion's already back to pre-pandemic levels, which makes our central business district tolling program more important than ever. I've made congestion pricing a major priority from day one in this job, reaching out to the advocates who have been so passionate on this front, and to federal officials as well, so that we can get on the same page and dispel any perception that anyone's engaged in foot dragging. I'm pleased to say at the end of last month, we really have turned a corner. Allison DeSereno is going to have a more comprehensive update on our progress today. But we're really now engaged on the cusp of, going 100 miles an hour, pardon the pun, in this public review process, which will open the door to the implementation of congestion pricing. Just a week after receiving approval from Federal Highway Administration, that DOT agency that's in charge of the Federal Environmental Review, just a week after we confirmed the 16-month schedule, we announced a plan for 13 virtual meetings with residents from the region's 28 counties, which have 22 million people living in them. This includes a special package of outreach to communities that have traditionally been excluded from the infrastructure planning process, low-income, immigrant, communities of color. For anyone who wants to learn more about this project, there is a new project website that was launched with tons of information about the project and about all of this environmental review activity. There are all kinds of public meetings coming up, as I said, in the next few weeks and months, and we hope everybody will be participating. So I want to make clear that we're committed to seeing this project through. I think everybody who's worked with us in the last couple months knows it. It is a critical source of support for the capital program, and it's the right thing to do for our environment and for this making the city continue to be a model of how to resist climate change. So with that, let me close, and I want to ask at this point to the agency presidents for them to give an update on ridership and their back-to-work strategies. Craig?
Thank you, Jano. Thank you so much. So as Jano said, I'm really excited to report that New York City transit ridership, total bus and subway, surpassed 4.2 million rides for the first time since the pandemic. Really a milestone. For context, pre-pandemic ridership averaged 7.66 million riders per day across subways and bus. On Monday, subway ridership was at 2.92 million, as Jano said, and bus ridership was at 1.31 million riders. In fact, this morning, just on a personal note, I was on the 5 train, and I could tell you it was packed like pre-pandemic. So really, that was exciting to see. Also, for Commissioner Calise and our paratransit customers, we did see a slight uptick on the paratransit service as well. We're coming in at about 78% of pre-pandemic, so that continues to be our strongest mode. The transit team is working hard to keep these numbers trending positively. I'm committed to bringing our riders back to the transit system by ensuring they have the best possible experience when they are on our subways and buses. To that end, we are looking at all aspects of our system to ensure we are delivering world-class customer service. But safety is first, as we know. So we continue to address COVID-19 with regular cleaning and disinfecting of our cars, stations, and buses. And masks are required while using the transit system. And we continue to see very good mask compliance. I know our employees and customers need to be safe and feel safe in our system. And so we are continuing to work closely with NYPD to address the threat of crime in the system. And as I mentioned in Transit Committee on Monday, cameras are now installed in every one of our subway stations. Another great milestone. These cameras are crucial in helping us combat and prevent future crime. We are also taking aggressive actions to address crew shortages. We have increased the number of train operators and conductors we are able to train in any one class. We decreased the length of training for new train operators without sacrificing safety. 7 weeks sooner for the A division and almost 8 weeks sooner for the B division. We are adjusting subway schedules to reflect faster running times on some lines and lengthening operated tours on other lines to reduce the number of crews required to meet full service. Moreover, we are targeting important bus initiatives like all-door boarding, expanded bus lanes, camera-enforced lanes, more intersections with transit signal priority, and a complete network redesign as promised. And we remain focused on improving service for our paratransit customers, including expanding the capacity on our broker services and finding the right balance to incorporate the flexibility of on-demand services into our transportation offerings. So I just want to note, contrary to that misinformation that one of the public speakers had said, we are working closely, myself, Frank, and Q, alongside with Commissioner Calise, Commissioner Mihaltris, in regards to seeing what would be the next steps in regards to our eHeal program. So just want to say that. So I want to thank you to our transit workforce who has been working so hard, and also thank you to Jano and this board who continues to show us tremendous support and commitment. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Craig. Phil?
Thank you, Jano. I'm also pleased to report that ridership on Long Island Railroad continues to exceed projections. As I reported at committee, we exceeded 50% of our pre-pandemic weekday riders on Friday, carrying over 150,000 people. And weekend ridership remains robust, hitting 82% of pre-pandemic weekend ridership this past Sunday. And this week, we continue to see strong ridership. With more and more destinations reopening and employers bringing staff back, I'm confident that the trends we experience on the railroad will continue in the right direction. I would like the riders and potential returning riders to know that the Long Island Railroad workforce remains committed to giving them a safe and reliable trip and all the real-time information that they need to know to make decisions and best get them to their destinations. I'll start with safety. Our train cars and stations, as you reported, Jano, continue to receive unprecedented daily sanitization that was started with the pandemic early last year. And we continue to aggressively remind all riders that wearing face coverings are required and one of the best ways to protect yourself and others. We've seen mask compliance jump back up to 92%, and we will continue to drive this up with continued robust messaging and distribution of free masks. Anecdotally, as Commissioner Law mentioned on Monday, in my personal observations, I'm seeing near 100% compliance with masks, but we also know we have other trains where it is lower. I'm pleased to report with the efforts and support and encouragement of enforcement by MTA PD, one of our lower compliance trains, we saw an 8% increase, bringing it back up over 90% on that train. So along with masks, hand sanitizers are available, is available in all our stations, and these measures help get us through the worst of the pandemic, and it will be instrumental as we continue the rebound. And as you mentioned earlier, the HVAC systems in our trains continuously mix fresh air with filtered air, 12 times an hour recycling air fully. And that doesn't include every time we stop at stations opening the doors, allowing fresh air to enter. It is safe to ride, as studies have shown across the globe, and every day myself and 150,000 riders now are doing it safely. And as ridership continues to return, know that the Long Island Railroad Train Time app is industry-leading and not only allows riders to pick trains based on recent average ridership, but they can pick which car to use with real-time loading data in the palm of their hands or listening to platform announcements that will let riders know if a particular section of the train is less crowded. And the app not only gives real-time loading, but all real-time status of train arrivals, departures, platform information, helping our riders feel more confident in their travels. Public feedback on this has been positive, but the best feedback is seeing the usage of the app. Pre-pandemic, the old app had been widely used at 70,000 riders when we carried over 300,000 trips. This Friday, we saw 59,000 individual users, and we're carrying 50% of that. That demonstrates that riders are taking advantage of the app, the information we're providing. It truly is first in class. And the data we give our riders is also invaluable to operations and how we provide service. Monitoring ridership in real time allows us to make adjustments as we've been doing throughout the pandemic. So for instance, today we observed train 2015 coming out of Ronkonkoma with strong returning ridership. So to better accommodate them, we're adding 2 cars to that train. And service planning and transportation will continue to monitor and adjust when possible to best serve the returning riders. We're focused on making sure customers know it's safe to ride our system, and nothing beats taking public transportation when you can see the traffic that is now on the roads these days. Today we've got an extra 11 trains leaving from Penn Station starting at 12:44 p.m. going east for those observing Yom Kippur. Discretionary travel has been strong, and we continue to encourage ridership and support as we support local communities and downtowns. With the successful return of summer service and our promotional summer Saturdays, we look forward to autumn weekends, turning monthly tickets into system-wide passes and enabling them to bring up to 4 additional guests for only $1 each way. Perfect to go east to see the South Shore, the North Fork, or now with Broadway reopening into Manhattan to see a show. And all riders should know that Long Island Railroad and my sister agency at Metro North continue to offer single-trip fares at the off-peak rate. That's roughly 27% off the peak fare. And if you buy a 10 trip, that's an additional 15%, bringing that discount to 42% off the peak fares. I'm confident that riders will continue to return and want everyone to know that we remain committed to continuing to deliver reliable and safe service, focus on state of good repair during these unprecedented times. Thank you, Jana.
Thanks, Phil. A lot of good news. Kathy, Metro North.
Thank you, Jano. I'm happy to report that early ridership data for September is looking extremely favorable. This past Monday, we carried more than 122,000 riders, which is the most ever since the pandemic began. And as I've been sitting here, I just got the ridership information for yesterday, where we carried almost 121,000 riders. All of these ridership statistics validate our decision to increase weekday service to 82% of our pre-COVID service levels, which we did a week before Labor Day. Last week's average daily ridership of more than 112,000 is 43% of the pre-COVID base ridership in late February of 2020. It is also 8.4% higher than our previous highest ridership during COVID, which had been set the week of July 19th through the 23rd. And as we've been observing since last year, weekend ridership has come back very strongly. Just last weekend, ridership was about 70% of what it had been in our base week of February of 2020. In other words, our weekend riders are coming back faster than our weekday ridership. All that being said, we're continuing to see growth in the sale of weekly tickets and strong growth in both 10-trip and monthly tickets. So the growth does appear to be spread across both commuters who are returning 5 days a week, weeklies and monthlies, as well as those who are buying a hybrid model of office work, the 10 trips. In addition to increasing service and travel options, we have several ongoing strategies to welcome back our riders. As Phil's already described, our stations too are as clean as they've ever been, thanks to our comprehensive disinfecting regimen. We have staff in stations who are handing out masks to customers who may need them, approximately 2,000 masks every week. Train crews also make masks available to anyone on board without one, and we continue to remind our customers that masks are required. Our real-time capacity tracking feature on the MNR Train Time app allows our customers to see where most seats are available on our arriving trains. And like Long Island Railroad, Metro-North customers are no longer required to have a bike permit in order to travel with their bikes. The number of cyclists has grown during the pandemic, and we want transit to facilitate that growth, not stand in the way of it. Like Long Island Railroad, we also have launched an Autumn Weekends promotion, which runs through November 21st. This promotion provides our monthly customers an affordable way to get themselves and their family members out of the house, out of their cars, and onto the train for their weekend trips. We're incentivizing our monthly ticket holders by offering them the chance to bring an extra person to ride with them for only $1 every Wednesday as part of a new program, Friends and Family on Wednesdays. We also have new MTA away deals where Metro-North riders can save on admissions to destinations like the Storm King Art Center, the Intrepid here in New York City, Rye Playland, and the New York Botanical Garden. And as Broadway reopens this week, Metro-North provides frequent service to bring showgoers both into the city and then take them home after the show. Last but certainly not least, as Jano has already mentioned, we're extending off-peak fares through the end of the year so that customers using single ride trips and 10-trip tickets can save up to nearly 40% off the normal fare. To conclude, I would like to again extend my thanks to the Metro-North employees who worked so hard to restore service after Ida and who continue to focus every single day on providing safe and reliable service and an excellent customer experience for our customers. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Kathy. Now we're going to hear from Danny DiCrescenzo about bridges and tunnels. Danny?
Thank you. Good morning. As we don't move people, but we allow people to move, we have to make sure that we know our traffic numbers and know our trends. So since July, we've been between 95 and 98% traffic levels when compared to 2019. And Labor Day weekend, we saw 99.3% of traffic when compared to Labor Day of 2019. On that Friday, before Labor Day, September 3rd, we hit our first 1 million vehicle traffic day since 2019. October 25th, 2019 was our last 1 million vehicle day since the pandemic. In other words, when you look at this slide, we're either right at or just hitting the 2019 totals, which were record-breaking totals back in 2019 with over 329 million vehicles crossing our facilities. While people start to return to the office and start going back to school, we just want to remind everyone that we have the Tolls NY app, which has been a major success at Bridges and Tunnels. We collected over $70 million in toll revenue. It's been downloaded over 1 million times by our customers and allows them to add vehicles to their EasyPass accounts, pay tolls by mail quickly, set up automatic payments, and check and manage their EasyPass accounts. Finally, as I said in the beginning, post-Labor Day, our staff is looking at the traffic trends as, again, people returning back to the office and going back to school. We're looking at the traffic numbers, and we'll report back our findings to this board. Thank you.
Thanks, Danny. Now, consistent with the emphasis that we're placing, or at least I'm trying to place on ridership and service, we're going to hear in a slightly different order than normal from the Chief Customer Service Officer, Sarah Meyer.
Hi, everyone. So today we're thrilled to show you all a multi-channel phased marketing campaign aimed at bringing our riders back, with images and messages appearing throughout the metropolitan region. We are 100% focused on winning customers back and proving the value of our system and showing lapsed riders what they've been missing. So we kicked off the campaign with a short video that plays tribute to our heroic employees and also that shows the amazing city that we all love. So we'll go ahead and play the video now.
Welcome back, New York.
Great, I'm glad. Good. Thank you guys so much. So that video was produced by Joe Chan and team, and Joe has joined us at the table, and I think this is the first time I've ever seen him in a collared shirt and jacket. So thank you all for that. Pleasure. We're going to switch back to the PowerPoint now.
Oh, this is on? Okay. Hi, good morning, everyone. Glad you liked the video. Very proud of our in-house team, creative services team that created all of the work that you saw and will see. So in addition to celebrating New York and the people who keep it moving, the campaign has two very simple themes to it. One, that public transit, oops, did that come up? Public transit is good for you, and public transit is good for the planet and good for New York. In light of recent weather events, this message resonates more than ever. We want people to know that they can take part in fighting climate change and you don't have to drive. We can do the driving for you and you can drive less. You'll see these images across New York City and the suburban counties on outdoor media and on digital media as well. You'll see versions for Metro North, Long Island Railroad, subways, and buses. We think it's a simple message, but we think it will resonate. We hope you agree. We also want to talk more about how the commute is not just something to be tolerated, but actually has lots of benefits on its own. Lots of us who have been working from home know that sometimes escaping from home is rather nice. So train time is you time. You'll see variations on this theme in the creative that follows.
Thanks so much, Joe. So just wanted to talk a little bit more about the campaign. Obviously, we're focused on outdoor media to get those that might be in cars and those that might be taking other forms of transportation. We're focusing on outdoor billboards. Thank you to Outfront Media for donating their remnant work for us. So you'll see big billboards in the city and on highways across the region. We're also advertising on 700 buses in New York City, on the sides of buses and on the tails of buses. Radio ads will be going live shortly in the New York City metro market. We're also featuring ads on digital platforms and social media, Facebook and Instagram, where we're going to show parts of that video and the full video and see how it does. We're also really focused on multilingual translation and print ads in community newspapers. So those have gone out. There were ads last Friday, and they'll continue to roll out over the coming months. We're also using our Outfront Digital Screen Network. Again, really thrilled that the capital program put such an emphasis on making sure that our riders in system have access to the information they need to make their commutes faster and easier. So really making sure that we're showing those ads. We're also focusing on what's called, it's a silly name, but digital urban panel that's outside of our subway stations. You guys might have seen them in Midtown. Those are really helpful as people walk by, so focusing on those as well. We can go to the next slide. So here you can see some of those translated ads I was just talking about. And then here are some of the messages that are showing up on social and digital. Again, focusing on what Joe was saying, on the personal time that you now have during your commute. Bus time is book time. Also focusing on the cost of the ride, right? I think people have forgotten what a single ride costs. A lot of people were very used to buying monthly Metro cards. So getting back to, if they're commuting 2 or 3 days a week, if they're just doing discretionary travel, highlighting that $275 can really is a very low number in comparison to the surge pricing that we're seeing on FHV vehicles around the city. Next slide. Also focusing on the incredible work that Jano and Frederica and the C&D team, as well as our in-house forces at Transit, have done, focused on new elevators at 11 stations. Also, there were a couple elevator openings on Long Island Railroad recently, and also focused on increasing speeds. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but my train is certainly faster these days, and showing people that we've really increased speeds at 226 locations now in the subway system. Really incredible work done by the speed team there. Okay, shifting focus a little bit more to the railroad specifically. As Kathy and Phil noted, we're still running off-peak fares, and we think that not a lot of people know this. So doing more to get this information out through digital advertising to those that may have stopped riding with us. It's really important. Off-peak rides, as they've mentioned, extended through December 31st. And then we're also touting the new autumn weekends and the Wednesday Friends and Family programs, showing everybody, some of these pictures were taken, they're not staged. They were just taken showing our riders having fun, getting to know each other, and having social experiences on the train. So can't wait for more, and we hope that more riders will come back and experience all that they've been missing. So welcome back, New York. Thank you. Happy to take any questions, and I know that there are some board members that like
Board Member Albert is ready to go.
It's great to see this campaign. Long time ago, the Long Island Railroad had trestles over streets with slogans on them. I seem to remember the one that says, "Driving can be fun on the golf course." So it's great to see that we're doing this. People need to be reminded that the system is out there and ready to serve.
And Sarah's made the point, but I just want to underscore, this is all being done by our in-house team. We have an amazing in-house marketing team that, under Sarah's leadership, that has sort of captured how New Yorkers, the voice that New Yorkers are open to receiving. And it's just a great resource for the MTA. So thank you to Sarah and team. Commissioner Lynn, Board Member Lynn.
So thank you. This was inspirational, the presentation, so I really appreciate it. I just wonder, I know that, for instance, David Jones and other board members have said a number of times, do we consider a reduction in transit fares? And I know that many people have said, well, maybe it doesn't make sense, or we really don't know the economics of it. But I wonder, given that we actually are doing a discount on the railroads, because certainly eliminating peak fares is a discount, of whether we should consider fare holidays on some weekend days, something to bring people back to the trains and get them to see all the great work that's been done, to show the wonderful work on the shuttle, to show all of the capital work, to show faster moving trains. Perhaps we should be exploring something like the elimination of peak fares in the transit and figure out what's the best way to look at that.
Okay, I mean, we will have that discussion. I just want to remind you, you all, it's hard to communicate in a marketing campaign, but the fact that you broke with a 10-year tradition of raising fares on a regular schedule, which is was an important milestone. So that had significant benefit. It also had significant financial impact. And what we'd like to do is to look at this systematically with the board. There's work already being done by the staff, and we're going to bring the board into it promptly. But the point is well taken. Commissioner Khaleesi, and then Board Member Glucksman. I'm going to get the lingo right one of these days.
Sarah, great stuff. I like the fact that you continue to add accessibility in there, especially the elevators, and representation of people with disabilities in that as well. If you haven't done this already, you can make the video audio described for people with visual disabilities. That'll be very helpful. I can't wait to see bringing the bathrooms back slide in that. Just letting you know.
Still trying to get Charmin to sponsor that. We'll get there.
Board Member Glucksman.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you. I got a message that the peak fare option is still popping up on e-tics and TVMs. So can that be fixed?
We'll look into it. Thanks for the heads up.
It's not on train time.
Any other comments? All right. Enough happy talk. Now we're going to hear from Pat Warren, the Chief of Safety and Security.
Thank you, Chairman. You've heard that we're really focused on enabling New Yorkers to get back to work and school and entertainment and their lives as, that they want to enjoy, and also that safety is foremost in that process of helping people get back to work. So. So let me just start off by saying, of course, it remains our top priority, safety does, and regarding the COVID-19, while the MTA's positivity rate remains low at 1.19%, we are deeply concerned by the risks presented by the Delta variant. Vaccinations remain the most effective deterrent to the virus, and pursuing the vaccination of our workforce continues as our major safety effort. As of today, we know of over 42,000 members of our workforce vaccinated, and we continue an aggressive campaign to get more of our workforce vaccinated. To this end, we offer vaccinations at multiple sites on MTA properties. We offer pay incentives to our represented workforce and time off to our non-represented employees. Further, we have an extensive communication campaign, which includes having members of our chain of command as well as call center contact employees to describe the benefits of vaccination, as well as to provide technical support in supporting the vaccination, in supporting them getting the vaccination, as well as uploading information into our database. Over the last 6 weeks, our efforts resulted in a 15% increase in the number of employees known to be vaccinated. As further protection of our employees and families, on September 7th, we established a vaccination or test program which requires all employees to either be vaccinated or receive a COVID-19 diagnostic weekly test. Currently, the program is voluntary with compliance requirements expected in October. To support our employees with this program, we established 120 sites across MTA properties, and we will continue to grow these locations as required. We also continue to provide masks and other PPE to our employees and clean and disinfect workspaces, as you've heard, and we prescribe, of course, great hygiene practices. Together with our labor partners, we're committed to providing increased protections for the workforce. With regard to protecting our customers, we continue to clean and disinfect. You've heard that of our stations, cars, buses, and paratransit vehicles one or many times a day. And of course, the advanced filtration systems that was talked about earlier that are in all of our vehicles and many of our facilities. Masks are mandated by the federal government to be worn on all transportation systems and are an important deterrent to contracting COVID-19. We recognize that prompting mask usage among our customers is an important component of protecting one another. To support the use of masks, we have provided tens of millions of free masks to customers, which is complemented by a robust communications effort. We also welcome riders back to the MTA. As we welcome riders back to the MTA, we stepped up mask force efforts by having the MTA police, security, and agency staffs work together with the NYPD, stationed at key hubs and networks to provide masks to those without them. These efforts have seen mask usage recently rise on buses and trains, which as was described recently. The MTA police will step up enforcement efforts in the coming weeks on our commuter rail systems and within the transit system as necessary. Switching to the topic of security. Having our riders feel safe throughout the subways and bus lines is a vital component of supporting riders as they return to the transportation system. The increase of NYPD officers, MTA police officers, and New York City transit security agents, together with the installation of cameras throughout the system, has contributed to an overall annual decrease in crime of approximately 20%. Together with the NYPD, we monitor crime trends and react to them as they develop. As riders return to our transportation options, we want them to recognize that our police and security forces are dedicated to providing them a safe, quality experience. Now, virtually, let me introduce Chief McGran, our acting chief of MTA Police, to give you a quick update.
Mr. Warren just mentioned, the overall crime trends are in the positive direction. Although we show an increase of 17 crimes year-to-date system-wide, the numbers, of course, are skewed by the pandemic. Compared to 2019, we are in fact down almost 74 crimes. But again, the numbers continue to be skewed until after the pandemic is over. We recognize that the wearing of masks by our officers and our customers within the transportation system is critical to reducing the pandemic. And therefore, we have encouraged the passengers, as well as my own officers in some cases, to wear the mask at all times when inside of our transportation system. Along those lines, we have stepped up inspections of the trains, as Phil Lang pointed out, on the Long Island Railroad in particular. He has seen a significant increase in the number of passengers that are wearing the masks. In addition, I myself have done step-ons and step-offs at certain stations, including Hicksville, and having to wake up some not happy customers to remind them that they do have to wear a mask, even though they are on the train, sitting separately from everybody else. The mask is still something that's very important in controlling the outbreak of the pandemic or a further increase in the pandemic. Also of note is that we continue to grow in the MTA PD to our fully authorized strength of nearly 1,300 police officers. We added 78 officers in the last month alone, bringing up our total number of officers to 1,024. We expect to be at our full complement sometime in February of next year. The addition of rollovers from the NYPD, as well as civilians from the general public, has helped us to diversify our department to numbers where we have not seen in the past. The increased diversity has certainly helped us communicate better with our ridership, with our customers. And also the fact that we have been adding some of our officers into the subway system to help the transit police department, our partners in blue, in the crime situation down there, has seen some significant decreases in crime within the subway system, as well as the addition of the cameras in every station now throughout the system. It will continue to drive the overall crime numbers down. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief. Chairman, that concludes our remarks.
I just want to reemphasize one thing that Pat said, which is that we've got an additional presence on the Long Island Railroad. Phil made this point as well, of the MTA police, and that with collaboration with the NYPD, we have moved more officers into hubs where there's a lot of people moving around to optimize the opportunity to remind people about mask wearing. So we're actually upping the effort, and as Pat said, the visibility of law enforcement is helping us to push the numbers up. Board Member Zuckerman.
Thank you. Thank you, Jano, and welcome to you in your inaugural run at that seat. I wish you a lot of longevity and success. I like your optimism. You've always been an optimistic guy. I think of myself as more of a realist, verging as I get older on pessimism. One thing I do want to talk about, we had a long chat in the Safety Committee meeting on Monday, which was a paucity of my fellow board members were at that meeting. It's not a large committee, but it's worth bringing up a topic we discussed there. The New York State vaccination rate for 18 and over with one shot is 82%, as reported by the Times, and 73.4% for fully vaccinated. We are not at that level yet among our workforce. And I subscribe to the thing that many people in this room keep saying, the public and staff and leadership that they are heroes, our workforce. And I applaud Norman and Vinny and John for their work in representing those heroes. But we need them to take one more heroic step, which is to get vaccinated. Part of getting back into the system is, yes, your job asks you to come to work. And yes, it's Broadway reopening. And yes, it's your fellow citizens wearing their masks. But it's also in part that the employees are wearing their masks. I invoked my, probably not fair to do this, but my 15-year-old daughter who rides the rails from Garrison to Dobbs Ferry every day to school. I invoked Bob Lynn's grandson who is going to school now. And I want both Lily and I don't know your grandson's name. What's that?
Otto.
Otto, I love that name, Otto. I want Lily and Otto to feel as safe as they can be, and I need our labor partners, our heroes, to have their folks take one more heroic step and take the jab in their arm, because that's what has to be done in part to get everyone back. So, Sarah, your campaign is beautiful. Thank you for that. To your colleague Joe, it looks beautiful. And marketing messages work. I work in the media business, so I know that advertising does work. But we have to not just have the perception of safety, we need the reality of it. Get vaccinated, please. I beg of you. I think, no, thank you, Randy. Okay, back over to you, Jano.
Other board member comments? Board member Lynn?
So, thank you, Jan. And first, I also want to sort of applaud your collaborative and collegial approach. I think it is a substantial change in approach, and I really applaud it. And I think it's been very helpful discussing safety issues, discussing all the issues that flood issues, all those issues now I think are talking about people working together collaboratively, which I think is critical. Clearly also working together collaboratively with labor is critical. I know you've expressed that many, many times, and clearly the issue that Neil talks about of unvaccinated workers is that critical collaborative issue. I think all of the leadership of the unions, by and large, have taken the jab. The question is how you get the membership to take to get the shots. And I think there needs to be a move that the choice by individual workers are really putting all sorts of people at risk. The unvaccinated puts the worker's family at risk. It puts other workers at risk. It puts other MTA workers' families at risk. It puts the public at risk. And I know Neil and I have both spoken about kids under 12, unvaccinated children. All these people are at risk. It puts healthcare workers at risk. And all of these issues are things I think we need to come to grips with. And I'll talk about this a little later, but one of the other things it does, it puts the cost of our health plans at risk. And there has been studies that said that we all know that the people in emergency rooms and ICU units are basically unvaccinated employees, that you're 10 times more likely to be in an ICU unit if you're unvaccinated. And this will lead to dramatic increase in healthcare costs. And so I think beyond all of the other issues of how we get to work together, we need to come to grips with the fact that our projections of healthcare costs may be way off if we don't take a hard look at what is the story if our workforce is 60 or 70% vaccinated versus 100% vaccinated. And I think we need to look at those things together, and we need to make sure that we pull all of the levers possible to make sure that working together, we get the whole workforce vaccinated. Thanks.
Victor Calisi.
Thank you. I just want everyone to be aware that there is a segment of the population that cannot get vaccinated. And it's a small segment, but nonetheless it is. And it is a lot of people with disabilities, so we have to be cognizant of that. But there is a large percentage of people that can be vaccinated. And I am all for it. The vaccination does two things. Keeps you out of the hospital and keeps you from dying. And I'm down with that. And I'm really concerned about kids. I don't have any school-age kids going to school that aren't vaccinated right now. My kids are vaccinated, but if I have a school-age kid that cannot be, I'd be scared. And we have a responsibility as people, as humanity, to be vaccinated. And I'm all for making sure people are vaccinated. The New York Times just reported that kids are being diagnosed with COVID at 5 times the rate. That's scary. So we certainly have an obligation. We do have to work with labor to make sure that gets done. and vaccination is the only way through this. Thank you.
Norman Brown.
Yeah, I agree with almost everything you said. From a labor's point of view, I want my position to be clear that I come down 100% on the side of workplace safety. And vaccination is more than just a part of that. Vaccination is the key to that. And I feel that thus far, we have 65% of our people are vaccinated. We'd like to get it up to 85, 90%, ideally 100%. I believe in Europe, they're up, Europeans, 85% of the workforce is vaccinated in Europe, and they've got substantial results from it. On the other hand, this is the people that have done it so far have done it to take one for the team. They didn't go get a shot in their arm for the fun of it. A lot of them are in good shape. And, I agree with Bob that, theoretically it would, impinge on the value of the health plan, the cost of the health plan, though I suggest these are very complex equations. And, in many cases, people are dying who are otherwise heavy hitters in the health plan anyway. So I don't know how that works out actuarially after 20, 30 years, and that's really not my concern. We have to be focused explicitly on workplace safety. That's my point of view. Workplace safety for us is rider safety for our customers. Thank you very much.
I will just make one comment before we move off the subject, which is that I think, Neil said I was an optimist, so I'm going to play the role for a moment. We have moved the numbers dramatically in the last 5 or 6 weeks. One of the things that we started when I had the chance to move into this new position was a telemarketing campaign, because a lot of our operating workforce, unlike the C&D workforce, which I oversaw and which we got up close to 90% at this point, but they're reachable every day on email and at their desks, whether they're at home on a cell phone or at the office. The operating workforce is harder to reach, and we know that there are a lot of people out there who got vaccinated, and for whatever reason, when they're asked to upload their Vax card or their Excelsior Pass or whatever, that's not something that they do, and they don't operate in an environment where there's a scanner sitting there and they can do it. So we reached out and we started capturing a lot of information from a substantial piece of our workforce that it was vaccinated, but we didn't know about it. We then worked with city and state and our Aetna, which you're acting on today, to pull in information because we are an insurer about where there was information out there, but we didn't have in the MTA about who's vaccinated. We know there are still a lot of our folks that we have not got information on are vaccinated. So while everything, I agree with everything that's been said about the urgency and the importance, and we will continue to emphasize this, but we're going to do it in a way in partnership with labor because we need their help. That is not, we can't, we're not going to persuade people unilaterally, and we're going to do it in partnership with labor. I just want to acknowledge that our labor partners have been partners in the communication effort as well. So urgent, important, not something any of us wants to compromise on, but there is some evidence of movement. We've moved 15 points in 5 weeks. So we're going to keep at it, and I think we're going to achieve levels that maybe will make the less optimistic among us a little more comfortable as we move forward. So if we finish those subjects, I'm going to ask Bob Ferran, who we usually don't bury finance, especially when we have lost 50% of our income in the agenda, but I did want today to really emphasize the ridership story, which is obviously our first priority. Bob?
Okay. Thanks, Jano. I'm just going to hit the highlights from Budget Watch that David Keller went through in great detail on Monday at the Finance Committee meeting. And as a reminder, this reflects operating results through August and subsidies for the most part through September. So it's a little bit of a mismatch. Preliminary results to date are favorable. Passenger revenues through August were favorable by $84 million. primarily reflecting the higher ridership against forecasts. Toll revenues through August were slightly unfavorable, about 1% or $9 million, due to lower than forecast traffic volume. Passenger and toll revenues, however, remain significantly below pre-pandemic levels, and compared with the first 8 months of 2019, with passenger revenues down $2.4 billion, or 57%, and toll revenues, when adjusted to account for the 2021 toll increase, down $81 million, or 6%. Operating expenses through August were favorable by $326 million, mostly attributable to timing and lower spending for materials and supplies, professional services, maintenance and other operating contracts, and lower paratransit service expenses due to trip usage, as well as vacancy savings. Overtime spending is $21 million, or 3% favorable through August, and is attributable to lower maintenance requirements, tightened management procedures, and revised crew needs at Metro North. Debt service is favorable for the month and year-to-date due to lower variable rates and timing. Overall subsidies receipts are favorable by $169 million, reflecting receipts through August for PMT, payroll mobility tax, the MTA aid, and for-hire vehicle fee through September, and through September for MMTOA, PBT, and real estate transaction taxes. Let me just say that the real estate transfer taxes are also favorable through September. The mansion and internet market sales taxes are a combined $68 million favorable through August. It's a reminder, these are the two taxes that we had the ability to use for operating results to offset the deficit last year and this year. We used them last year. We're not using them this year. Those monies are being recommitted to the capital program. We continue to work on the November plan, and as we see trends developing, we will reflect all of those into the November plan, and we will keep you updated. But that concludes my comments.
Thanks, Bob. We're now going to have a C&D update. I get to pass this off to Frederica Cuenca. Frederica?
Okay. Good morning, everybody. It's my honor to be here today and give an update on C&D progress and highlights this month. Is it up? Oh, that's not what I meant to do. Sorry. So here we have a picture of the Times Square shuttle platform. I think, as people know, this is a critical connection between the east and west side. Typically, it carries 80,000 people a day on a segment that's only half a mile. It's pretty extraordinary. These tracks curve sharply at Times Square, making it a nightmare for people with mobility issues, but really difficult for everyone. And anyone who's used the shuttle, you know, they've done that calculation. Should I go around the curve, rush around the curve, or should I stay where I am and wait for the next train? Well, life just got better for our riders of the shuttle. Over the past 20 months, we rebuilt this. We straightened the tracks, going from 3 tracks to 2 tracks, which allowed us to consolidate the platforms. The result is a much better operation. The longer and wider platforms and trains resulted in a 20% increase in capacity. So there'll be less crowding on the platforms and faster boarding. And of course, the shuttle is now fully ADA compliant. We also added a connection between 42nd Street and Bryant Park and Times Square. It's worth noting that our investments are joined with private developer investments at both ends of the shuttle, resulting in new entrances and improved access. In the new connecting passageway, Nick Cave's spectacular mosaic installation is also accompanied by a short video that plays on our advertising live boards. If you don't usually take the shuttle, it's worth a detour. It's really beautiful. C&D was able to run this project far more efficiently thanks to a decision early on to consolidate multiple projects that were happening on 42nd Street and run them all as one integrated project under one project manager. Congratulations to Mo Solomon and his team, our contractor MLJ Contracting, and many departments within New York City Transit who worked together to get this project done and accelerated and on budget. Okay. Last month, we also marked the completion of the first phase of a joint effort between the MTA and the Village of Harrison to create new housing at the Metro North Railroad Station. This is a model transit-oriented development project with a revitalized downtown and better station environment. Through the partnership with Harrison and by leveraging the value of our own adjacent parking lot, we were able to attract a private developer to build 2 public plazas, nearly 150 apartments, retail, office space, and a new parking structure that increased the number of parking spaces for Metro North customers by 80%, and all of this at no capital cost to the MTA, the garage. For the garage, obviously the private development is paying for and benefiting from all that other building that's going on. So far, the garage is built and it's open to our customers. Also complete is an 83-unit building that wraps around the new garage, one of the plazas, and some of the retail is also complete. The second phase of this project will be completed in 2023. Thank you to board member Michael Fleischer, who joined us at the opening, and I should have remarked and thanked Andrew Albert for showing up at the Times Square shuttle and to do that as well. Our TOD group, led by Bob Paley, is looking to continue this successful model with other communities, for example, in Westbury on Long Island. And the TOD group really encourages towns throughout our region to work with us on their vision for station areas and smart growth. Also happy to report another major milestone for the third track project. On September 3rd, we reopened the Willis Avenue grade crossings in downtown Mineola. Actually, it was 2 side-by-side grade crossings, one under the main line and one under the Oyster Bay line. Each bridge was pre-built on site right there between 2 tracks. It's very tight quarters. We pushed one bridge and then the other over the course of 2 weekends. These crossings are located right in the heart of Mineola between foot traffic and cars. This is one of the busiest areas that the project has worked in. The team worked hand in hand with village officials to minimize impact to local businesses and to protect access to the NYU Winthrop Hospital that's nearby. These are the last 2 of the 8 grade crossings that Third Track has eliminated on the main line, all in less than 2 years. This milestone is a huge accomplishment for Long Island. These eliminations will allow trains to run faster and more reliably on the busiest stretch of the Long Island Railroad network, but it's also, more importantly, a major improvement for the nearby communities all along the main line. Fewer grade crossings means fewer accidents, fewer traffic backups, and fewer horn blows. We are on track to complete the heavy construction by the end of 2022. I don't know how much longer this, is that the next one? There we are, nice picture. And finally, my last item is not so much a physical project as a change in regulations that paves the way for the future. In June, the state of New York adopted a new building code that applies to our stations. Surprisingly, up until now, it was the regular building code that was applied to our stations. The same code that governs construction of houses, apartment buildings, skyscrapers. Not surprisingly, many MTA projects required us to obtain variances, which was a terribly lengthy and resource-intensive process. And not just for us at the MTA, but also for the New York Department of State, which issued the variances. So, led by Dan Nichols, we collaborated with the Department of State to collect the hundreds of variances that had already been approved, and from those put together a 20-page document that we can now use to guide our station projects. Having our own section of the state building code that specifically addresses subway and commuter rail stations provides certainty for our design process and will streamline the process of getting station design approved. This is an investment in every station project going forward, which is good news for the capital program as well. And that concludes my presentation.
Thanks, Frederica. In case, just to put a point on it, Frederica is, among other roles, leading the development of the 20-year needs assessment, which is the process that we will use to define the next capital program. So that's well underway, and it's something Frederica will present to the board in the coming months, so you're aware of some of the details and some of the process. With that, I think that was the regular business we were going to cover. I want, at this point, unless there are comments or questions from the board, to introduce Allison DiSereno to give us a special presentation on Central Business District tolling. With the board's, with the board's approval, I am going to try to start providing detailed briefings on key issues at these board meetings, so that we can make sure that that we're covering the topics with an opportunity for board discussion every month on something that's really at top tier importance. So, Allison, are you ready to
I
start?
am.
Okay.
I am. Waiting for the slides to go up, and we'll be set, ready to go. Okay. So thank you, Jano, and good morning, everyone. Before jumping into the slides, I want to take just a moment to remind everyone of how we got where we are today. For more than a decade, New York City has consistently ranked among the worst cities for traffic congestion. Various studies and panels have explored how best to address this challenge and have repeatedly pointed to congestion pricing as the best tool for doing so. In April 2019, the legislature passed and the governor signed into law the MTA Reform and Traffic Mobility Act, which provides for TBTA to design, develop, build, and operate a central business district tolling program aimed at reducing congestion and creating a new local recurring funding source for MTA's capital projects. Because many of the roadways within the central business district have received federal funding, federal authorization must be obtained. This authorization is contingent upon completion of a federal environmental review in accordance with the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA. MTA's TBTA, together with New York State Department of Transportation, New York City Department of Transportation, are working with the Federal Highway Administration, the lead federal agency for this effort, to fulfill the requirement. After consideration, the Federal Highway Administration determined that the appropriate level of analysis for this review is an environmental assessment with enhanced or robust outreach. Today, I'll be taking you through what's entailed in this effort. Our study area for this effort is immense. It includes 28 counties across 3 states, New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. It encompasses a population of over 22 million people, with 12.3 million of them residing in environmental justice communities. It incorporates 5 tribal nations, 1 federal and 4 state, and has 23 federal, state, local, and regional agencies beyond the 4 that I just noted who are actually involved in running the program. We're anticipating, as part of this robust outreach in the early weeks, coming up very shortly and having already begun, in fact, over 20 planned meetings. This doesn't include additional meetings that we anticipate will be coming our way as people call out to us and ask for more information. It includes the formation of an environmental justice technical advisory group, for which invitations have already been sent out, as well as the formation of an environmental justice stakeholder working group, which people can find out more about on our website and through the presentations that we will be giving soon. In order to get the word out, the team has worked around the clock to create posters that are up in all of the stations throughout the MTA system, as well as elsewhere. We've created handouts, we've created digital and social media advertising, as well as advertising in publications, over 40 publications, in fact, throughout the region, in English and 8 additional languages. Wanted to give you a little bit of a sense of the schedule. Again, it is immense. On the high-level schedule, what you can see here is broken out. In the blue area at the top is our outreach. The green is our modeling, which I'll come back to momentarily. And the orange is the back and forth once we have a document together. And I'll come back to that before we leave this slide. In the blue area, the dark blue is what we've already kicked off. This is our outreach that has begun. We began last week with outreach to various agencies around the region. First with our New York State and federal agencies, and then with additional agencies from the state, the city, New Jersey, and Connecticut. We're going to be beginning our public outreach next in the 23rd, September 23rd, and I'll come back to that on the next slide. But in the meantime, we're also going to be doing our environmental justice outreach. And as you can see here in the light blue, these are the unplanned meetings that we anticipate are going to be continuing all the way throughout this period until we have another set of outreach meetings a little bit further on, once the document is actually published and open to the public for review. While this is happening, we're doing a tremendous amount of modeling. Those are the green bars that you see in the middle. The modeling has already begun. We've been running different scenarios. We've been exploring and analyzing, going back and forth with the team. And this process will continue and will be informed by all of the public and environmental justice outreach that we will be doing. When that's all completed, and after we finish the final round for this portion of the process of the public outreach and environmental justice outreach, we will be able to fully draft the document and go back and forth with FHWA as well as other agencies that need to review the document before public notice. We anticipate at this point that the public notice will be in the second quarter of 2022. There will be another period, as I mentioned, which you can see at the top of the slide here in the dark blue, where we'll have additional formal outreach at that point to comment on the document itself. All of those comments will again be incorporated and addressed in the EA, and we're anticipating that the final document and a decision document from Federal Highway Administration will be ready by the end of 2022. In terms of what's coming up in the next few weeks, we wanted to give people a flavor. Again, this is all out there. If you have questions, you can go to our website. You can see the ads in the paper and elsewhere. Our public webinars will begin on the 23rd of September. There are going to be 10 of them, each of them with a slightly different audience focus. And you can see here, everything from the Manhattan Central Business District to the rest of Manhattan, to the other boroughs of Manhattan, New Jersey, Connecticut, and other parts of New York. They will be followed, as you can see, on October 7th by the EJ, or Environmental Justice webinars. There will be 3 of them, one focused on New York, one focused on New Jersey, one focused on Connecticut. And our first Environmental Justice Technical Advisory Group meeting will be held immediately thereafter. We will take a lot of what we heard from the earlier discussions and make sure that that informs the EJ Technical Advisory Committee as well. We anticipate another meeting of that EJ Technical Advisory Group in November, along with the 2 EJ stakeholder working groups. For people who are watching today and would like to participate in the stakeholder working group, you can submit your information on our website. We anticipate those will also be happening in November, and then there will be another round of environmental justice webinars that will in essence report out on what we heard during the group meetings of the technical advisory group and the stakeholder working group. Next slide, please. So I'm not going to go through all the detail here, but it is important, and I wanted to give a sense to those in the room today and to our board as to what is exactly entailed in all of this. This is no small effort by any means. Most times when an environmental assessment is happening, it is a significantly smaller area and a much smaller project in terms of what's being looked at than what we're dealing with. This slide depicts the breadth and depth of the modeling analysis and the analysis for the environmental assessment, which will assess the effects of the Central Business District tolling program on traffic, transit, pedestrian flows, air quality, noise, historical and cultural resources in EJ communities, among many others. Indeed, the modeling makes use of nearly a dozen different models and databases for the full analysis. A few highlights just to give a sense. We begin by using what's called the best practice model. This is a regional model employed regularly in our region and used for transportation planning. The model itself includes 6,100 network links for streets, arterials, and highways, and 4,600 analysis zones for our program, with routes, frequency, usage, and fees for all regional transit service routes. And this isn't just MTA, but also PATH, New Jersey Transit, and other public and private services throughout that 28-county study area. There are 2 high-level alternatives that we will be exploring. There's a no action, for which we don't build the Central Business District program. And there's the action, where the CBDTP, as we refer to it, is built and implemented. For the action alternative, we're going to be running 6 different scenarios to ensure that we understand the full range of potential environmental effects resulting from different toll rates. The no action and each of the action scenarios are actually run in 2 different time periods for a total of 14 scenario runs. Each of those runs needs to be assessed, reviewed, refined. Sometimes we go back to make sure that everything seems to be working appropriately and is reflecting the information it should. Once this initial modeling is completed and reviewed, the results are then used to feed 2 different traffic models. These traffic models will explore the potential effects over 100 different intersections, as well as effects on multiple tunnels, bridges, and highways. The results of the initial modeling will also be used to analyze potential effects at 15 to 25 different transit stations in the PATH, New Jersey Transit, and New York City Transit systems, and will be used to feed the modeling for air quality and noise effects. In addition to all the quantitative analysis and incorporation of the input from the outreach that we will be obtaining, there will be qualitative assessments as well of the model results related to various areas of interest. When all that work is finally completed, we'll be able to submit that draft environmental assessment to federal administration. So that's just a flavor of what's going on. The team is working really hard. Again, it's New York City Department of Transportation, New York State Department of MTA, TVTA, as well as Federal Highway Administration and a number of other federal and New York State agencies. And we're also reaching out to our colleagues at the other agencies at PATH and New Jersey Transit for additional information to make sure we have the best representation of all of the potential effects. Thank you.
Questions and comments? Mr. Jones.
I hate to look for work. What role is this board going to have in this process? I'm hoping not much, but that's not fair. I mean, of course, we want to participate. Is there an active role where we'll have to weigh in at some point and vote or hold discussions?
I was hoping you would do the data coding for the Synchro model.
Yes, absolutely. I always love that.
Look, this is the first step. Look, we for the last few months there was this discussion that was, you know, at a level of generality because you weren't informed about what was going on in this process. So this briefing was meant to clarify so the board at least had a window. It's not the whole story, but a window into what's going on, both in terms of the outreach and the schedule that's driving it, and also the modeling and the analytical work. So I think that's been accomplished, and the next step is for us to keep you apprised of where we stand in that work, both in terms of how the schedule is being met, and also the data, whether there are any issues with respect to data collection or outreach that would throw us off schedule or off process in some way. So we will provide periodic updates on the status to the board. The other thing that we're doing, and we're using, frankly, this forum, is to make sure that we're being transparent with the world at large about the subject, which is, you know, of great public interest. And people had some questions, and so we're being transparent.
Anna, if I may just add momentarily, just for our board, the other thing that would be really helpful in this initial round, please, is the more we get the word out, the better. We want people to join us for the webinars. We want them to submit comments, however they feel about it. We would like to see those comments. And as I mentioned, you can submit them online through our new website. You can also submit them by phone, by email, or by mail. Thank you.
Board Member Zuckerman.
Thank you, Jen. Allison, can you put back up the chart that had 17 boxes and 15 lines and whatever that was? Just put that up for a sec, please. Thank you. So I've been on the delivery end of that to clients, to boards, to prove how busy we are and how complicated things are also. So I understand the theory, and I appreciate what you're saying, Jano, because it's not a just stick it up, put the gantries up and be done with the thing. But could you just, for a board perspective, could you just tell us the analytical questions, maybe it's 1, 2, or 3, that all this modeling is trying to answer? Because I can't tell what you're trying to do with all these arrows and boxes and lines. So could you just, what are the questions you're trying to answer, please?
Absolutely. The most fundamental question to be answered and addressed is what exactly is the effect of central business district tolling on our region? How will it reduce congestion? Where will it reduce the congestion? The second piece of all, and will it raise the money that is necessary to be raised? The second piece, and related to that, is how do the toll rates ultimately affect the congestion levels and the revenue, as well as the number of vehicles entering into the central business district? For the environmental assessment, there are 4 key objectives. One is to reduce congestion. One is to reduce the number of vehicles entering the central business district every day. Another one is to raise the revenue as per the Mobility Act. And the fourth one is overall to implement a system that is or a program that is consistent with the Mobility Act. All of this modeling helps us determine how implementation will ultimately affect the region. And as part of the scenarios and running each of the scenarios, we want to understand what is the range of effects, which scenarios best meet the objectives of the environmental assessment and the overall program, and which scenarios may potentially be problematic in terms of the effects, and what would we do to address them.
Thank you.
And I would add one other goal, which is to comply with the federal National Environmental Policy Act to insulate the implementation of this important program from litigation that could delay it or prevent it from being done.
Very smart. One follow-up question. So I've been on the board long enough to recall when Polly Trottenberg was still on this board, who's doing a bang-up job for all of us in Washington now. I remember her telling me that there were studies that had already been done that provide some sense going into this of what the traffic implications would be, what the reduction in ridership would be, or gains in ridership, et cetera. So is there any work that already exists that you're building off of, or are you starting from scratch? That chart made me think you're starting from scratch, which I would be surprised is the case.
It's not starting from scratch. The way the program was built is largely the result of many of those studies that had gone before. The modeling itself uses, as I mentioned, the best practice model. That model is actually a large regional model that was also used for earlier modeling over the years. What is different is that in every year as things change, that full model needs to be updated. So when there are new bicycle paths that weren't there prior to us doing the work that we're currently doing, they now have to be incorporated into that model because of the Central Business District Tolling Program may be different with things that are there now that weren't there before. So where you see, whether it's bicycle ways, pedestrian walkways that weren't there that took out certain lanes, for example, or in other places where there may have been traffic lanes added or modified along the way, all of that part had to actually be redone and included in the modeling.
David Jones.
Allison, when the idea was first conceptualized, I had my staff do a rough analysis of potential impact on low-income communities, and we ended up fully supporting it. I'll get you a copy of that. I think it's a crude idea. We were basing it on populations who were not driving in. They couldn't afford it. So the implication was immediately that this had virtually no impact on people at or near poverty. So we'll get you that, but that's just a part of your issue, not going to impact the very poor.
Andrew Albert and then Bob Lynn.
At what point do you expect the appointment of the Traffic Mobility Review Panel?
First of all, that is not hindering the critical path of what you're
Sure.
seeing. So I just want to make that very clear. But that's ultimately a decision that the leadership in Albany is going to have to make, and we're going to stand ready to support their efforts to identify a traffic mobility board membership that is ready to play that role.
Thank you.
Bob Lynn.
So I assume that chart was in part a pedagogical tool to help us irascible and difficult board members to understand the complexity, and it had that impact. The question I have is, given that we have much more positive sense towards achieving this than we certainly had in Washington before, and is there any way of expediting this in ways that we haven't thought of so far? And I know I'm speaking to the converted. I know, Jano, that this is something that you believe in. That chart is so daunting. Is there a way of making that chart less daunting?
Look, I mean, I'm going to ask Allison to respond, but I'd say broadly, this was negotiated. It took months to negotiate between this team, in the state DOT team and the city DOT team, who are all part of this, providing just those kinds of ideas about how to shrink the schedule, and the Federal Highway Administration, which is the agency of jurisdiction within US DOT. And those discussions were extensive. And the result was we actually did shrink the schedule, so that the 16 months reflects a lot of back and forth on how do we tighten up the schedule. But that said, nobody is saying that if there are opportunities to shrink it further, that those won't be acted on. But so far, with the back and forth of Federal Highways, who is focused on fulfilling the legal responsibility so we're not subjecting all of us to litigation risk, so far that schedule is the one that everyone's agreed on is the tightest achievable, but the discussion, is never ending. Mr. Calisi.
Thank you for the presentation. I've been working with Allison for some time on the issue of addressing concern for people with disabilities, because until we get to system-wide accessibility, people with disabilities are forced to drive in. So Allison has been working with me on this, and I just want to make sure that anything that's done is also conveyed to the advisory committee here for ACTA, as well as Metro North and Long Island Railroad, so you can keep the advocates up to date on what's happening.
Noted. We'll do that. Mr. Brown.
Yeah, does the picture you drew for us here, does it presuppose a zero free riders scenario, or is that something the Transportation Board will decide? Is it baked into the process that nobody's going to get away for free, or is, when we go to the Transportation Review Board, are they going to carve out spaces for particular interests, apart and separate from the disabled community?
That is the statutory responsibility that's given to the TMRB to decide on the pricing and the discounts. But the team is working with a range of scenarios so that they can advance their work while simultaneous with the TMRB doing its work. Allison, do you need to step in on that issue?
Yeah, thank you. I also wanted to clarify that the statute itself provides for 2 exemptions. So those exemptions are built into all of our modeling. Beyond that, as Jano mentioned, those 6 scenarios for the, in essence, ACT scenarios, right, where we would build the Central Business District tolling program, each have a combination of potential exemptions, credits, discounts, or none of the above, in order to, again, give us a full range to understand the effects of the decisions there and what happens on the congestion and the revenue and the vehicles coming into the Central Business District.
So is the sort of public outreach process going to be immune from that, or does everybody go to the microphone from here to Timbuktu and say, I deserve to be out? Are you...
The outreach is the outreach. People can come and comment. At this point, importantly, they're commenting on the program and the process. When we do our second round of outreach, they will be commenting specifically on the environmental assessment, since it will be out for public review at that time. I don't know what people will come and say. I can say that we have already been getting lots of comments in through the website. We have, the last time I checked, which was yesterday morning, we were near 400 comments already. And frankly, by and large, they've been positive. For others who have concerns, all of them will be gathered, they'll be indexed, and we will be looking at them and how the program potentially either already addresses it or may need to address it or may not, depending upon what the comment is.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, well, thank you, Allison. We're really grateful for all the work that you and the team have been doing. And I'm glad some of it's starting to see the light of day so people understand what's being undertaken. Okay, at this point, I'm going to move on to some more of our usual routine business. The minutes of the July board meeting and the minutes from each committee have been distributed to all the members. Are there any comments or corrections or omissions. Mr. Albert is the Statue of Liberty on these matters. Go ahead.
Sorry.
Let her go. Let her rip.
So on the minutes, on page 5, where you're talking about the public speakers, you have to change what says congestive pricing to congestion pricing. Because the other one is with a cold, I guess. And then on page 11, on the second paragraph, it has to say the chairman thanked instead of thank Governor Cuomo. And then a few paragraphs down, it has to say Chairman Foy instead of Foys. And if those are corrected, I'll move the minutes.
I think that they will be corrected, and we accept the motion. And is there a second? I see a second. Any objection? The minutes are approved. The next item for board consideration is an extension of the family benefits. This is a sort of what we call a walk-in, so I just want to emphasize the supplemental materials have been distributed to the board and have been made available to the public. Chief People Officer Paul Fama will introduce the item. Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I think it still is more, well, it's afternoon. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Today I'm introducing a recommendation. In April 2020, the MTA Board unanimously ratified the first in the nation COVID-19 Family Benefits Agreement to provide payment of $500,000 from the MTA to the spouse, beneficiary, or estate of any worker who died as a result of COVID-19. In addition to providing health insurance for 3 years to the spouse and any dependent children. This agreement expired on April 13th, 2021, and the agreement was extended to August 31, 2021. As a result, it is recommended that the MTA Board prospectively approve the extension of the earlier agreements through December 31st, 2021, and authorize the chairman or his designee to execute such agreements without further approval on terms with any certified representatives of MTA employees which have not yet executed such agreements. Further, the chairman would be authorized to extend the supplemental benefits to the non-represented workforce under the same terms.
I will make the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, is there any discussion?
Two questions. First of all, I see in the notes that you provide the exception for employees who refuse to be vaccinated. That still continues? That's part of this?
It's not that they refuse, it's they have a certified medical or religious documentation that they are exempt from vaccination.
Yes, but for those who don't have that?
They will not receive the benefit.
Okay, so that exception still applies?
Yes, it does.
It wasn't quite clear the exception applied. Then let me ask one other question, because in the language, which I'd never seen before, it says approved when the vaccine was made available to him or her. And is that a possible piece of contention, or is it understood that the vaccine has been made available to all of the workforce?
I think it's fairly well documented, Commissioner, that the MTA employees had first, in January, had the ability through the work of the Safety and Health Group for vaccination for the last 8 months. So it would be very difficult, I think, for anybody to prove that this vaccine has not been made available to them.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, with that, I have a second. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. The railroads met jointly this month, and board member Kevin Law will deliver the report. Kevin.
The Long Island Railroad Committee and the Metro North Committee met jointly and in person this Monday, September 13th, and report the following. There are a total of 4 procurements being brought through the Joint Railroad Committee this month. There are 2 competitive items, one for Metro North, totaling $5.3 million, one for the construction and development, totaling $2.25 million. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them.
I'll make the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition or abstentions? Thank you. The items are approved. Mr. Law?
There are two ratifications this month, both for construction and development, totaling $4.35 million. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them.
I make the motion. Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition or abstention? Thank you. The items are approved. Mr. Law?
This concludes the report of the joint Long Island Railroad and Metro North Railroad committees.
Thank you, Chairman. Next, Transit and Bus. Chair Mahaltis.
Good afternoon, Chair Lieber. The New York City Transit and Bus Committee met on Monday and reports the following. There is one competitive procurement for construction and development being brought through the New York City Transit and Bus Committee this month totaling $26.5 million. The committee recommends this procurement, and I move it.
Is there a second? All in favor? Any opposition or abstention? Thank you. The item is approved. Chair Mahaltis.
This concludes the Transit Committee report.
Thank you. The Bridges and Tunnels Commission will hear from Chairman David Mack.
Am I on? Everyone hear me? Great. Okay, Mr. Chairman, the Bridges and Tunnels Committee met on Monday, and there are no actions or procurements this month. This concludes the Bridges and Tunnels Committee, and thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mack. Next, Committee on Finance, Chairman Schwartz.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. The Finance Committee met on Monday and reports on the following. There are two action items this month. The first item seeks board authorization for ratification of the TPTA Special Obligations Resolution authorizing sales tax revenue obligations, authorizing the issuance of bonds and notes to finance approved capital program transit and commuter projects. The second item is to seek MTA and TPTA board authorization to amend existing supplemental resolutions authorizing MTA new money transportation revenue bond and bond anticipation notes, DTF bonds and anticipation notes, and TPTA payroll mobility tax bonds and bond anticipation notes. The committee recommends these items, and I move them.
There's a motion on the table. May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any contrary-minded or abstentions? The actions carry. Mr. Schwartz.
Mr. Chairman, there is one competitive procurement item. The Finance Committee met on Monday. We did not take an action on this procurement item. Rather, we decided to have this item brought to the full board today for a vote. Reason why we didn't take a vote is that there was a little confusion regarding this procurement item on Monday. And to suffice to say, I think we've cleared up the confusion. There was a little concern that that the Finance Committee might be voting on a $6.5 billion procurement item. That is not the case. I want to thank the other Finance Committee members, Kevin Law, Bob Lynn, Hader, others that were there. I apologize if I left anyone's name out, for asking a lot of good questions. And what I want to just, for the record, make clear is that this procurement item involves the New York City Transit Health Benefit Program, which is a self-insurance program. We're currently at the end of the 5-year program that's administered by Aetna, who was recommended and chosen to continue to run the New York City Transit self-insurance program for the next 5 years. The good news is that through the work of MTA leadership and staff, there is a significant savings in terms of the administrative costs that will be handled by Aetna, as well as significant savings with the Medicare Advantage plan that Aetna is also in charge of running. So the issue of the $6.5 billion was really based on the amount of claims that are projected to take place over the next 5 years, over the $4.5 billion that was projected in the current end of a 5-year
I think the good news that I just want to point out is that the consultants and staff, whether it was ANON or staff, they did a very good job during this current 5-year program in that what was actually projected and what was projected versus what actually occurred was within 5%. And that's very good because you're trying to project the unknown and you don't know, and that includes the COVID pandemic occurring. When you look at the overall claims costs, they have factored in a 6% medical inflation factor because health insurance costs always go up, unfortunately. They never go down. And also a 1.5% increase dealing with any COVID-related utilization increases. So, but I think the focus is on that we're really voting to procure Aetna as the administrator for the next 5 years on this self-insurance program. And the administrative costs we're actually saving $14 million because they're getting 2.1% versus the current 3%. And the Medicare Advantage premiums through the work of staff and Aetna has gone down like $80 million. So I want to move this item. Again, I want to thank, including Commissioner Poore, I left his name out, but I want to thank the members of the committee for their insightful questions that helped us clear this matter up and eliminate any confusion. But I think it's worthy, since this contract expires in December, that we move this item forward.
Okay, there's a motion. Do I have a second? Commissioner Poore, a second. Is there discussion? Board Member Lynn.
So I am and will support the vote for Aetna. I believe that Aetna is this process of selection of the RFP was very good and went through an extensive questioning process and came up with a very effective provider, continuing the provider of Aetna for the health benefits. The concern I have and continue to have, it's not going to affect my vote, but is a request I have of you, Jano, is that there is a projection that the claims and the administration of the program will cost $6.5 billion over the next 3 years. That is, there have been people who have said that healthcare costs may be as much as 10% more based on unvaccinated employees. And I raised the issue to Aon, and Aon said they could study the impact of various forms. I asked for, I guess I called it a sensitivity analysis, to say what is going to be the impact of that $6.5 billion projection if we stay at 70%, if that's the number of vaccinated, if we go at 80 and stay at 80, or if we reach 90. Or if people don't get booster shots down the line. These are all issues that can be projected. And Norm said, actuaries can come up with lots of different numbers. I agree with that, but Aon can come up with they came up with the $6.5 billion to begin with. And I think the board should know, and it's necessary for financial planning, should know what exactly is the range of possible costs of that $6.5 billion based on the various different assumptions.
All right. If I could try, Commissioner Lynn, the team has looked at this obviously as hard as we can. We've had a great partnership between procurement, the people team, and Aon. This is a very technical subject, and anything is an estimate, but we can reassure you that it's at the top of our list. We know that this is a big spend, and we will continue to monitor that on a regular basis in order to ensure if things start to climb, that we will continue to communicate with this board. And to your suggestion, we will ask Aon to continue to do more analysis in this regard. But it is one of those things that we, not only at the MTA, but all organizations will face. But we are confident at this point, given their history, that this is the best estimate that we have to date.
So I just want to translate, if I may. What I think is being asked for is that we've already done a professional projection of how COVID impacting health of MTA employees will translate into healthcare costs. What Board Member Lynn is asking for is if we would do sensitivity analysis on top of that of how vaccination at a couple different levels might impact on what that number is. It seems reasonable to ask our consultant to do that, and unless there's objection, I'll say yes. We will do that work. Anything else that anyone wants to discuss? Okay.
We've already had a conversation with Aon in order to perform those studies.
Okay.
And just to assure you, Jano, we meet quarterly with the budget department, with our actual experience with the claims, to make sure we're in line and we don't surprise them at the end of the year and say, oh, give me X more.
Yeah, I appreciate it and understood. I think what's being asked for is now a specific study right now, looking forward in a couple different scenarios. So
we've contracted.
We're going to do that.
Yeah,
Okay.
Jano, I think all the committee members concur with Commissioner Lynn's recommendation. I also want to thank Commissioner Jones, who I left out in my naming of names of the committee. So, but we can now move forward on the motion.
All right, we have a motion on the table. We have a second. All in favor? Any opposition or abstention? All right, the motion carries.
There are 4 real estate action items for this month described on pages 106 through 111 of the board book distributed for this meeting. The committee recommends these real estate items, and I move them.
Second.
Jano, I'd like to recuse myself on the Village of Amityville real estate license. My firm is doing some unrelated work with the village.
Okay, let the recusal be noted in the minutes. We have a motion on the table. All in favor?
Aye.
Any abstention or objection? Motion carries.
That concludes the Finance Committee report.
Well, I think we've come to the end of the meeting. If I have a motion to adjourn, we can go about our business. Thank you for everybody.
All right, everybody, we got Jano Lieber right here.
All right, so the role of Ed McMahon will be played by Tim Minton. So good afternoon. I thought we had a really productive board meeting. It was, I think, really energetic and engaging, and we talked about some big issues. There are 2 things I just want to highlight at the outset before we start with questions. One is, wow, another record on ridership, both on subways and buses and combined. So 2.92 on the million on the subways, 1.31 million on buses. Those are each records, and together they are a record. So we're clearly, ridership is moving, and as I said, it's indicative of the fact that that people are coming back to normal life and they're trusting in the MTA. You know, one indicator of how much people are actually willing to and will ride the system is that the levels, when it's discretionary on the weekends and holidays, the numbers are actually much higher on a percentage basis compared to pre-COVID. So that indicates that people are ready to get back on the subways, ready to get back on buses, ready to get back on commuter rails, and it's it's going to start to move when offices reopen and some of the things that we've all been waiting for are starting to unfold, and that is, as I said, starting to happen. The second thing is, just to clear up one point that I made, when we were talking about the TMRB, that Traffic Mobility Review Board, I did say we were going to consult with Albany, which we will, all of the relevant elected officials, governors, legislators, and so on. Ultimately, that decision about the TMRB is going to be made by the Tri-Borough Bridge and Tunnel Authority Board, which is the MTA board. So just a point of clarification on that. So with that, I throw it back to Mr. Minton to choreograph all of us.
All right, Jano, first question right here in front of you. N.J. Burkett, WABC TV Eyewitness News.
Thank you, Tim. Mr. Lieber, some have suggested that if you go through with this vaccination or get testing mandate, that large numbers of your workers will quit. Is that something that you're concerned about? Do you think that that's a realistic concern?
Look, our workforce has been heroic through COVID, and they are trained, professional, and highly valued. So nobody wants to, with that scenario is unthinkable, and we don't think that's going to happen. What we're doing is we're making a lot of progress. We've moved literally in 5 weeks since I came upstairs. We have moved 15 points in terms of the vaccination levels. And there are a lot of people out there we still haven't been able to hear from about whether they are or aren't vaccinated. And our experience, and my personal experience at MTA Construction and Development, is when we reach those people on their cell phones, which, by the way, train operators and bus drivers are not allowed to answer during the workday. They're not allowed. But when we reach those people, we find out that more of them are vaccinated than we knew about. So that process is underway. It's headed in a very positive direction. And I think it would be seriously premature to start talking about doomsday scenarios where people are leaving their jobs. MTA employment, these people have made careers. They've shown dedication. And I think that they're going to remain committed as we work these issues through.
I can just follow up real quickly.
Sure.
The city, as you know, did have a surge in people getting vaccinated. Then it sort of leveled off. Aren't you concerned, perhaps, that you got to this got 15% up, and then you might level off from here?
Again, there's no point speculating because the trend is otherwise, right, NJ? But in 5 weeks, we've moved the number by 15 points, and we're still engaged in the outreach. We're doing, phone calling with professional telemarketers who have been successful in reaching them. And again, remember that our workforce is not sitting like my old workforce at the C&D organization. They had emails. They were at their desks to a great extent. Even when they're in the field, they're reachable on cells throughout the day. That's not the case of our field workforce. So we're still trying to reach them. We have cooperation from a lot of the union leaders who are themselves vaccinated and proponents of vaccination. And I think we're making a lot of progress. The combination of high vaccine rates and mask wearing is definitely making our system very safe. We've seen it in Europe, we've seen it in Asia, and we're going to see it here. Yes.
All right, we're going to move on to the Zoom now. Clayton Gusa of the Daily News is in witness protection or something, but we know it's not a fake background because of the way it looks. Anyway, Clayton, you're up.
Okay, thank you. I have three very quick ones. I will ask them into session.
Only three.
Only three. Janet, when will the subway bathrooms reopen? What's keeping you from reopening them? The second one is, will the congestion pricing environmental analysis factor in prospective costs of the tolls? Don't you need prospective costs to estimate the impacts of traffic and transportation mode share once it's implemented? And then can you provide us with an update on the status of the MTA's negotiations with Connecticut and New Jersey over the $730 million in federal funding that is being disputed?
So number one, short answer to the short question, which is I'm going to get back to you on the question when subway bathrooms reopen. It's not among the things that I've caught up to in the month I've been at this. Second issue about congestion pricing. Again, this is the federal environmental review process. There's a lot of law. There's a lot of policy direction on how to conduct it. We have six, as Allison described, we have 6 different scenarios of different combinations of pricing and discounts and so on that we are going to use to analyze this even before the final decisions have been made about those issues. That will satisfy the requirements of the federal environmental law, and it will give us enough information to game out in that complicated that complicated modeling exercise you saw described at today's board meeting, how all these things will interrelate and the variety of different outcomes. So I think we're on the right track. I'm confident that those things nothing's going to hold us up because we're absolutely committed to moving this forward. Your third question about where we are with New Jersey and Connecticut remember, Clayton, this is the dispute, such as it is about how to split up the COVID relief money that came from Washington in the last 2 COVID relief bills, right? The CRISA and the ARP, as those two bills. One was under the old administration at the end, and one was under the Biden administration. Money comes from the feds to the region, and then the region, the 3 states, whack it up, as we say. decide on the sub-allocations. And there's a history of doing that successfully, and there is a lot of history of partnership on all of these issues. This is a discussion among friends. New York's position is really clear. One, this has to be negotiated. We can't just hold a gun to each other's heads. This has to be worked out. But two, that the law that Congress passed for COVID relief was like a FEMA bill. It said we want the money to be used to replace the money that transit systems have lost because of COVID. And therefore, we said that you should use a version of the same analysis in figuring out how to divide it up among the 3 states. So what New Jersey and Connecticut say to us, no, Congress changed how they're distributing the money. They distribute it like it was FEMA money, but then we should treat it as if it was routine capital money coming for bridges, for rebuilding transit systems or capital investments. That makes no sense to us. It should be handled in the same way that Congress directed the money around the country. Just so you understand, we're totally willing to work this out with our friends in New Jersey and Connecticut, and they are friends. But just to make it clear, under New Jersey's proposal, Jersey would get 93% of its total 2018 operating expenses, and system operating expenses were the standard that Congress used to distribute the money, while New York would only get 68%. That doesn't seem fair. And our proposal, New York would get 72% of its 2018 operating expenses, and New Jersey would get 75%. So we think our position is pretty fair. And even more, to make the point even clearer, under our proposal, New Jersey would still get 3 times as much per passenger as New York. So we're not trying to pull a fast one on anybody. We're not trying to create some unfair, one-sided deal. We are trying to work something out in the spirit of what Congress did, which was designed to replace money that transit systems had lost as a result of COVID. It's no secret the MTA was losing $200 million a week in the beginning of COVID. And Congress said we want to replace that money, and we have to, again, sub-allocate it on a way that's consistent with that spirit. So we're stand ready to negotiate this out with New Jersey and Connecticut. And we just need an opportunity to sit down at the table rather than folks yelling at each other through the press, which is a little bit of what's happening. I wrote a letter to Secretary Buttigieg a couple of weeks ago, kind of laying all this out and asking the Federal Transit Administration not to decide the issue, because that statutorily that's not their role, but just to help facilitate a negotiation, because we're having trouble getting everybody to the table to sort of in good faith figure this out together. They are friends, but we need to negotiate. So that's where we are, Clayton. Next.
Let's go to the Daves. Dave Porter from the Associated Press. Good afternoon.
Hi.
Given the fact that so much of it has to do with the city's system anyway. I mean, let's assume you had all the money available that you wanted. What would you like to see done, and what can be done?
Well, look, I mean, there are 2 points that we learned that came out of that experience of Ida. One is, and this is really important, the subway system's incredibly resilient. We took 75 million gallons of water that we pumped out in the days around that storm, and we're an electrically powered industrial operation, and we were back in action in a couple hours. That's unbelievable, right? So we don't want to, diminish the fact that there were people who were stranded, there were people who were inconvenienced, but the whole region was shut down. And the idea that the MTA would shut down, casually based on weather forecasts, I mean, flash flooding is pretty hard to predict. We're not going to shut the system down when people are already in Central Business District and make it impossible for them to get home. If the subway needs to be shut down based on weather projections, it really needs to be done well in advance, like 12 plus hours in advance. Up to now, it's been a decision only made by the governor. So what we did in Ida is the system came back incredibly fast. We pumped a hell of a lot of water, and we serve passengers almost immediately after that conflict, that incredible emergency. And we got almost everybody home on the night that it happened, which, especially the heroic bus drivers who kept moving through the system. So there's a very positive story, I believe, pardon the pun, glass half full, plus, about the MTA's performance and the MTA's resilience. But to your question about what do we do now, the first thing is we have to identify the limited number of stations that are especially vulnerable to flooding. And it's mostly because, as you said, the capacity of the storm sewer system at the street level is insufficient to some of these flash floods that climate change appears to be bringing. And secondarily, there may be some topography that is guiding water into the system. So we can do some things. We did it with the Sandy resiliency funding to make it, in effect, to plug up some of the holes, the vents, the grates. You don't want to close down the stairways until you really are closing the system. So that's a tough one. But you can definitely limit the amount of water. And by working with the city to reconfigure how curbs are functioning, to have some higher curbs, to put some curbs around our entrances, we can definitely diminish it. But as I said, the subway system is not a submarine. It cannot be made impervious to water. We just need to limit it, how quickly it can get into the system, and help the city to figure out how to do more drainage at the street level. Important point. When we were ready to reopen the 7th Avenue subway line, which we all know, right in the middle of Manhattan, we were pumping like crazy, and the sewer system, the storm sewer system, couldn't take more water. That tells you that we have to deal with that end of the issue, as well as dealing, the limited infrastructure that lets in water around the subway entrances themselves.
I guess just to follow up real quick,
Yeah.
though, I mean, the fact that the system was able to come back so quickly and the things you were just saying, does that kind of remove some of the impetus to take maybe some bolder steps going forward when you were able to come back so quickly?
No, I mean, listen, there's the difference between Sandy and what happened with this storm is Sandy brought salt water. That knocks out electrical infrastructure like crazy. That's why we rebuilt the pumping systems in all the tunnels. That's why we had to rebuild a lot of the cabling all over the system, because salt water kills electrical infrastructure. So, but even though there is that difference, we're going to work with the city. Ironically, in the first week I came in, I revived this lapsed partnership with the city to focus on subway vulnerable stations that are vulnerable to flash floods. So we had already started it. That's good. Now we accelerated it. Dean Foulahan, first deputy mayor, and I agreed we got to get cracking. We're already moving. That group is moving very quickly, and we're going to take some actions with the city. But there also need to be these long-term investments in street-level drainage.
All right, we're working our way through the Davids. David Meyer is next of the New York Post.
Hi, Jano. Congrats on the end of your first meeting. Take my mask off. So, two questions on the storm. One is, does the MTA have a cost estimate for the damage from the remnants of Hurricane Ida? And my second is, the MTA sent out a service advisory ahead of rainfall last week. It sent out service advisories, I guess, in cooperation with the governor's office before Hurricane Henri. I'm wondering why such notifications weren't put out before the rain from Ida, which had been forecasted, maybe not as bad as it happened, and whether there was some sort of oversight there.
On the first question about money, we've given our initial estimates to FEMA, and that was in the $75 to $100 million range. Usually these numbers creep up as you start to understand the secondary impacts of whatever took place. But right now, the estimates of the impacts are in the $75 to $100 million range. In answer to your question about the advisory, I don't know the answer to. Honestly, I just don't know the answer to the question. So I would just ask you to give us a chance to look back and get back to you promptly today. So an IOU on that one. Okay.
Michelle Kasky, Bloomberg. Good afternoon.
Oh, there. Okay. Hi, and so again with Ida, so you mentioned,
you're analyzing the recent flooding issues in the 20-year needs assessment. But how soon do you anticipate incorporating some of these changes that you anticipate making to prevent more, future rainwater flooding? How soon do you anticipate incorporating that into your current capital budget?
It's a good question. What we're going to do is we're going to look at the most vulnerable stations, and that will be our first priority, and we will, I haven't charted it all out, but I anticipate incorporating it into the capital plan amendment in the next, it may take, a year to have it formally incorporated, but we're going to figure out how to pay for that stuff in the current capital plan for the actions we want to take on those especially vulnerable stations. So that's number one. But what I said is that the broader issues, whether it's the number of stations or different parts of the system and some of the bigger investments, are things that we should look at as part of our broader 20-year needs assessment. And that process is underway. It's not too far off. We're going to be into the next capital plan pretty soon. So as I said, there's the major across the agency investments that may be necessary. And as I said, a lot of this has to be done at the street level. So it may not all be MTA. That's what I'm trying to emphasize. But whatever we decide is the right thing for the MTA to do, we're going to do in this program, and then we're going to factor it in to the planning for the next program.
And you just mentioned before, the range, the cost estimate that you gave to FEMA regarding the damage from Ida. But what is the agency's, as of now, back of the envelope estimate of what it's going to cost the MTA to fortify some parts of the system that are vulnerable to massive rainwater flooding?
Exactly. It would be, just shooting in the dark. I don't want to do that. Let's keep in touch as this unfolds, and we'll give you real estimates. Okay. We spent, remember we spent $2.8 billion on coastal resiliency with Sandy, right? And that included investments not just in stations to keep water out, but in some of these huge facilities which are close to the waterfront, like the Coney Island Yard, 207th Street Yard, and so on. It's premature for me to say how much are we going to be doing, because flash flooding is hard to predict, right? And it's much more localized. We need to really understand, using modeling and some other analysis, what are the most vulnerable areas and where do we have to invest. It's not just stations. We have to look at the whole system.
I see.
Okay?
All right, Michelle famously thanked your predecessor. Every question began, "Thank you for the presser." Don't take it personally.
Thank you for this press conference.
There we go. All right, moving over to Alfonso. We counted 14 times she did that in the last year and a half.
And I know. And
Alfonso Castillo is standing by on the Zoom, equipment from Newsday on Long Island. Alfonso.
Hi, Jano. How are you?
Alfonso.
A couple of Long Island Railroad related questions, of course. Firstly, can you talk about the decision to extend off-peak fares through the end of the year? What's kind of the calculus there in giving up that extra revenue versus turning away some riders? And what's going to be the deciding factor to bringing back peak fares? Then I have a second question, if you don't mind.
Well, Alfonso, the issue for us is, number one, we want to incentivize people to come back, and especially people who are accustomed to commuting. So that would lead us to focus on people who traveled in the peak period. That's why continuing off-peak fares is such an incentive for what we call, for lack of a better term, the lapsed riders, right? People who used to travel, who used to commute on a regular basis, who are not. So that's number one. Number two, we just wanted, with the Family Wednesdays and the weekend specials, to say thank you to those riders who are being loyal, especially monthly pass holders. These are the people who are continuing to commute, whether they had to or they're just choosing to as a matter of personal preference, and we want to say thank you. Ultimately, when we get to the end of the year, what we're planning to do is, we may restore peak fares, but we're also going to be looking at some strategies. And we didn't want to just do it off the cuff for dealing with the new model of potentially hybrid work. So we wanted to do the analysis, to be thoughtful about it, and then to offer up a package once the board has weighed in, because it is ultimately a board decision, by the end of the year. So that's our strategy. It gives a huge benefit right now, and it looks forward to adjusted fare structures that are also incentivizing ridership, in the years to come.
The second question, if you don't mind, I know you've talked about third track being kind of the model for building at the MTA. Are you still calling it on time and on budget, given these issues that have arisen with Garden City and the refusal to grant the permits you need for the Denton Avenue Bridge replacement project?
Alfonso, you and I have been watching third track unfold together for some years now, and I'm going to ask our team to turn themselves into pretzels to make sure we make schedule and budget. But there's no question that this NIMBY action that we're facing from Garden City is a problem. They're taking the whole project and they're preventing us from completing this one bridge. And it's clearly retaliation for the fact that they lost the lawsuit. That we got a one-sided decision in the MTA's favor when they tried to stop us from putting up, new steel resilient utility poles that wouldn't fall down and stop the railroad every time there's a storm. And so they lost, and now they won't give us a permit to do work, which is pretty routine. So we're in court trying to deal with that. And there are a lot of people in Garden City who are wondering why their own community is stopping this project, which so clearly benefits Garden City as well as the rest of Long Island. More, faster travel, more service, reverse commuting, more resilient infrastructure, new stations, huge benefits for Long Island. And it's just unfortunate that one village's leadership is, for whatever reason, is taking a kind of a disruptive tack. But we're going to get through it, and we're going to work our tails off to keep schedule and budget.
And back in the room, and back of the room, Dan Rivoli is back there with New York One. Dan, good afternoon.
Dan, thank you so much for taking our questions. I wanted to ask a question about the effort to get riders back. I know we're in September. I want to ask you about that. But first, in August, operations, you're below 90% on service delivered, according to the latest books. And it's been going down every month since April. Your weight assessments, you have people waiting on platforms longer, more than a third of trains not meeting that standard. So what do you expect the numbers to look like for September now that you're expecting more riders to come back post Labor Day? And what can you tell riders about the fact of, what are you going to tell riders what to expect on reliable service?
Well, look, there's two sides of the coin. On-time performance is much higher than it was before COVID. That's good. People should look at the positive that there is. There's no question that we're having a little problem, like the whole country is having, like the whole region's having, with some staff shortages, because during COVID, when we didn't know whether the MTA was going to get money from Washington, we couldn't hire more people, and we're paying a little price for that now. But there's a lot of creativity going on at the leadership of transit under Craig Cipriano's leadership about how to deal with that. We're doing vacation buybacks. We're rescheduling people so they're having longer tours of duty. We are really compressing the training. We've doubled the size of classes. We're dealing with it. So, given the fact that we're running, on a bad day, usually over 90% of service for what right now is 50% of the customers, we're going to get people there. They're going to have a quality experience on these clean trains, and we're cutting the durations. We're cutting running times by attacking the slow signals and things that slow trains down. So I'm confident we can accommodate people coming back. We're really excited with all this good news of record ridership almost every day.
Thank you. And just a follow-up question in response to the issue that suspended the A division and the L line. What did you learn about what happened in the 84 minutes between someone perhaps accidentally hitting the power emergency kill switch and getting that power back on? There was an 84-minute window. What was going on in that time?
You know what? You're asking a very good question, and we have to be brutally honest with ourselves. There was not a proper protocol for how people who are in charge of dealing with that issue troubleshooted it. And it really forces us to go in and look at our own training and our own protocols. What clearly happened is that people who saw that some of the building systems were off, misunderstood and thought that they had also that the situation had caused railroad control systems to be turned out, and they were taking a lot of actions to try to fix what they thought was a problem, but the protocols and the training were not adequate to make them do the right thing, and as I saw the governor said, I promised the governor, we're going to get into it and we're going to fix it, because that is the beating heart of the subway system, the rail control center, and we can't have situations where people don't know how to fix problems that arise, because problems do happen. You got to be able to fix them right away.
Is it possible just to provide a little more detail? Because you said basically what the two independent engineering firms laid out, and I understood they criticized the lack of protocol. But what? I mean, can you explain? Did someone come to the rail control center?
No,
said,
these are on duty. We don't have to call in the Maytag repairman, right? You have on duty engineers who are responsible for various systems. What we found out is that folks who are responsible for the building systems didn't have adequate training and protocols, and two, that there isn't adequate visibility into the condition of all the systems. You know, I was involved with those office buildings at the World Trade Center for all those years. In the back of house, you have a building management system that enables you to see the condition and any issues that are arisen with every different system at once. And we didn't have a system that allows us to do that. So we're going to get that kind of system belatedly, and we're going to train everybody to operate as one team rather than people who are chasing after one system as opposed to another system. That's the issue.
And moving on to Dave Colon of Streets Blog. You'll note, Jano, he is rocking the New York Knicks because this is the time of year when they are undefeated and anything is possible. Here he is, Dave Colon.
Don't wise off. Cologne is a sartorial model that you should consider learning from.
Thank you. And I'm also a part of the Daves. I don't know why I was included in that. I had two for you, Jano. Just get the first one out of the way. The bus network redesign, it was reported this week, it's not supposed to be finished until 2026. Congestion pricing's coming in 2023 or 24 maybe. How exactly does that kind of fit towards adding improved or enhanced bus service when congestion pricing shows up if these network redesigns aren't finished?
Well, look, I mean, I don't think that one drives the other. We have to redesign the bus system. We have a bus system which still has people going to trolley lines that haven't existed for close to 80, 90 years. We have people going, we have a bus routing system that frequently goes to waterfront industrial locations that have disappeared 50 years ago. We need one that actually connects to the current configuration, where people live, where people work, where they want to go. So we got to figure that out. But it also, something that is that high impact on people's lives, you need a process that's inclusive. And all of, everybody on your side of the table would justifiably criticize us if we ram something down people's throats. So we're going to engage in a process which is as open as the congestion pricing process, maybe not as technical, but open and inclusive and collegial and consultative. And that's the only way we know how to get something done that was going to make as many people satisfied and improve things over time. So we can debate whether it should be this much shorter or that much shorter, but the real issue is we've got to consult, and we learned it from the two that have already been done, right? We learned how much consultation has to go into these things, and that's what's driving the schedule.
But is congestion pricing being included in part of this, and the effects of it, being included in part of these redesigns?
It like in the same way I described, like how they're managing scenarios for pricing and discounts. You also have the goal is to satisfy the federal environmental look that you took a quote-unquote hard look at the issues. That's the legal standard. And we're sure that we don't have to have the exact routing system down to every block and every stop in order to analyze the congestion pricing modeling implications.
And then, this is maybe something everybody this table is aware of maybe, but maybe people want to hear it from you. This is kind of a question coming out of Twitter. People are seeing this map of the congestion pricing study area and how broad it is. And they're saying, that this is something that's been studied by the federal government, by New York State, by outside analysts, and it always seems to show when you look at what does congestion pricing do, traffic drops, air quality improves, all these things. Pat was always, your predecessor was always very keen to say, these are things that have kind of good environmental effects on their face.
Yeah.
So, why is the federal government asking people from as far away as South Jersey to weigh in on adding a traffic toll to Lower Manhattan?
Look, there's a lot of history. This is not the place to get into the details of federal environmental law, but there's a lot of history on what you have to study with a particular kind of impact, a particular kind of initiative that will have impacts on traffic and air quality and social and demographic issues and historic resources and historic preservation. It goes on and on. There's a lot of law and there's a lot of precedent. So the professionals have lined up a project, and it's professionals from the city DOT, state DOT, MTA, and the federal government, who ultimately is the decision maker on what we have to study. It's they have to be satisfied about how to configure this, how to study it, and so on. What I would say to you, Dave, is that what we know is you don't want to take any chances, because you've seen major projects held up for years by litigation. So our 16 months is incredibly aggressive in schedule. The Bayonne Bridge, which affected 2 counties, took 33 months to study under federal environmental law. We're doing 16 months for a 28 county, 22 million people area, so it's aggressive. But equally important, we want to make sure that we don't walk into any legal quagmires. My watchword for the team is shortcuts are dead ends. If you try to go too quickly or go in the wrong way or understudy an issue, you might be setting yourself up for litigation that will block the whole initiative. So we're not going to do that, and we're following the professional's opinion.
I guess what people are asking is, what is the South Jersey role in this? Why are they part of something? Why is the study
in theory,
so
I mean,
far?
again, I'm not going to speculate, and happy to have somebody who's more of the professional to talk about technically how it works, but because the traffic implications obviously go down through the system, right? It doesn't. We all know that traffic isn't just the place where you're stopping traffic, but it cascades through the whole traffic system. That and the other impacts that the federal law requires us to study, for whatever reason, have over time been defined to include that bigger area because of the traffic implications and the air quality and demographic stuff. So we're going to study it, we're going to apply the law, and we're going to make sure that we don't take shortcuts, as I said, that are dead ends.
Going to move on. We got folks waiting from the radio desk of WNYC. Steve Nesson is on Zoom this afternoon. Steve, good afternoon.
Steve.
Hi there. Can you hear me, Jano?
Yes, I can, Steve.
Congratulations on the position. Thanks for taking our questions. I have 3, if you'll bear with me, not too tough, I think. Can you confirm that the number of subway and bus trips are the same now as they were at pre-pandemic times, 2019? I'm asking, is it fair to compare the 2019 numbers to 2021?
I have to get back to you. That it's just a stat I don't know offhand, but we can answer that question to you, and we will.
And as far as the increase in ridership, do you think there should also be increase in ticketing for non-mask compliance? I think Jose reported there were no tickets issued in August.
Well, listen, anyone who gets on the train and sees somebody who's not wearing a mask, it can be a source of frustration. I totally get it. I myself and my team will attest to this. I'm sort of relentless in handing out masks. So we all want to make sure that people are masking. It's both safe, and it also is consistent with the whole spirit of the subway, which is this is a shared public space. We respect each other. We follow the rules, and that's kind of the New York way. Ticketing is, I think, We're moving to a greater role for uniformed officials. We've worked out with the NYPD that we're going to have officers present in bigger hubs in more visible locations, and that's going to be starting pretty soon. I think this week and next, probably more next week, and I think that will make a difference. We don't have enough people to be on every train ticketing every person, but we're trying to message that this is that there's enforcement authority behind this. And on the commuter railroad lines, we're actually going to get MTA PD is going to be following conductors on a lot of trains to communicate that this is not optional. This is something that we're doing on the train. So we have a strategy that includes law enforcement. I'm confident that that's going to help us move in the right direction, as we have been for some time now.
All right, Jose Martinez, you were name checked. You get 30 seconds for a rebuttal. Go ahead. Or a question. It's up to you.
Okay. Hi, Jano.
Jose.
I heard you at least twice mention today I'm fogging up here.
Yeah.
The 20-year needs assessment.
Yeah.
Hadn't heard about that in a while. Can you give us a little bit more sense of when that will be out, why it hadn't been out to this point? Thanks.
So the 20-year needs assessment that we're doing now that I referred to, Jose, is the one that's going to help shape the new capital program, the 25 to 29 capital program. And that work is already underway. If you remember, we received a forensic audit at the legislature's direction, it was a year or two ago. And what it told us was you have to do your capital program planning on a more systematic basis, a more consistent basis, right? You should be basing it less on just the pure age of systems, what's the oldest piece in the system, and more on, real condition analysis of the assets and on, the criticality of those assets to the system. So that work has been intensely underway under Frederica Cuenca's direction for some time. And we've also got, the beginnings of, we've got developing analytical frameworks where we're going to evaluate different projects for the benefits that they have to, obviously socially and economically and otherwise. So that work is underway. I expect to have Frederica make a presentation at a board meeting in the next few months, and you're going to see, this is not something where we're going to roll out the answer tomorrow, but the work is underway, and the more important thing is it's following a methodology that's, we hope is more systematic as we were instructed by the forensic audit. Yes.
And a quick follow-up to that, and if you could address also how much more you expect resiliency and protecting the subway from extreme weather will be a part of this 20-year needs assessment.
Yeah, it will be more than it was up to now. Remember, we spent $2.5 billion, a lot of it federal money, on dealing with coastal resiliency issues. Huge success. Remember, come this last storm, we didn't have any water problems in the tunnels. The pumping infrastructure that we've installed in all the coastal areas and the other work that we've done has been very successful. But obviously we need now to, in the era of climate change, to deal with the flash flooding implications, which are a little harder to pinpoint where it's going to be. But that's what we're going to study, and we fully expect to be investing in mitigations.
All right, Jose, of course, is with the city. We're down to the final three. Kevin Dugan of AM New York. Good afternoon.
Hey, Jono. Thanks for taking the question. I wanted to see if you could lay out a little bit more detail. You mentioned you want to work with the city to double the fair fares enrollment. Could you explain a little bit about how you would like to achieve that, and also, given that this is mostly a city program, like how it is divided, these efforts are divided between the MTA and the city?
Well, look, it is a city program, and the MTA is really not in a position to make the decisions about the social priorities and discounts and things like that. That's really the agencies of state and local government, and we respect that. They've made a decision which we think is great, partly at the urging of David Jones, who's not only an MTA board member but a incredibly distinguished leader of the anti-poverty community in New York, that to have that fair fares program. The problem was that it wasn't known to most of the people who are poor and who are low income, I should say, and who might qualify. And So we're going to be running, they're developing the advertising media, and we're going to be running it on the system starting very soon, in sometime this month or maybe early next. So that's the idea, is we're going to try to let a lot of people know that they could qualify for, heavily discounted mass transit. And, hopefully it will make a difference. In the wake of COVID, we learned just how dependent our low-income communities, communities of color, the disproportionately essential workers, how dependent they were on mass transit. And it really underscored the need to make sure that they benefit from this.
And here's Steve Burns of CBS 880 Radio. He's looking at you on the Zoom there, Jano. Steve, good afternoon.
Hey, how are you? Congratulations to you, Jano, and thanks for taking the questions here. First is an IDA-related question. I covered the City Council's hearing yesterday that included the NYPD and the MTA. The NYPD said they were looking at a plan that would include closing certain stations should we see another situation like this again with sudden flash flooding. And then Demetrius came on a little while later and said they're not looking at a shutdown plan. So I wanted to kind of get at that dissonance and see, is there a plan to shut down certain stations if we do see this again? What's kind of the bridge of that gap there?
I'd say broadly speaking, the NYPD always has the authority to deal with situations that represent a threat to public health and safety, right? We're never going to gainsay that. The question is, under what circumstances would you preemptively shut down a system before a weather condition arrived? And I don't think that we've reached the point, historically it's been only the governor who closed down the system, the subway system or mass transit system. I just don't think we've reached the point, and certainly I haven't had those discussions with the NYPD, where the NYPD meteorologists would make a projection and then you'd start shutting down subway systems. It's not, especially in the situation of flash flooding. What we're dealing with is areas which are not coastal, which are in higher ground, but which might experience flash flooding. Which is very hard to project. I think it's unlikely we'll see NYPD shutting down stations preemptively based on meteorological forecasts. But we're always happy to talk to them, and they do have the power to, make sure that things are safe if you see an unsafe condition developing.
And closing it out today,
Just to
Danielle
follow up
Moyo.
on a separate question.
Steve apparently has a separate question for you before we go to Danielle. All right, Steve, let's roll.
Yeah. Sorry about that. I muted myself because I'm in the newsroom and things get chaotic from time to time. Now my colleagues are getting mad at me.
I'm having trouble hearing you, Steve, so go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, in terms of the, sorry, I'm blanking on my second question here. That's right, in ridership and fares. Ridership and fares.
Which issue?
On ridership. I understand there's the new marketing campaign that'll be underway shortly. And getting back to Dan's question about ridership delivery and the work power issues manpower issues that we've been seeing. At what point is there an inflection point where you do see a certain number of riders come back that may get turned off from the system, given the amount of weight that they might experience? Are you at all concerned that we could see riders wanting to come back but turned off from the system because of the service issues?
Look. Number one, we're a long way from being, at capacity, right? We're, as I said, on a bad day, we're running 95% of the service for 50% of the people. So we got a little ways to go before your hypothetical starts to take effect. What I believe is that New Yorkers are ready to come back to mass transit and resume their daily lives. We're seeing it every day. We're going to try to make sure that we're doing everything in our power, and I've enumerated what we're doing. We're training people like crazy, and adding workers every day, and we're going to be there. But the most important thing is service is good. On-time performance is better than it was before COVID. The trips are faster because we're looking at how to speed the system, and the subway cars are cleaner than ever before, and we're ready to welcome New Yorkers back. That's what the campaign is back, and I think people are reacting.
All right, Danielle Moyo from Politico is going to take us out today. Last question. Good afternoon, Danielle.
Good afternoon. Thank you for taking the question. I have two. First one's, I think, quick. Just to build off what Clayton asked before with the funding dispute, is there like a deadline for when the states have to come to an agreement on that?
Well, I think what I understand is that the deadline, which has been created in practice, is that there is a discretionary pot of money that Congress created for transit systems that had extraordinary impacts from COVID, financial impacts, and to qualify for that discretionary pot, which is $2.2 billion, you have to have finished your local sub-allocations and done all the paperwork by, I believe, the 8th of November. So we really need to get cracking finishing this because, the paperwork takes a while. I assume the negotiation won't happen overnight. And New York is ready to get to the table and start to resolve this in the spirit of friendship and cooperation that has always prevailed between, the three states in the tri-state region.
Gotcha. Thank you. And then secondly, I'm curious if you can give a little bit more information on the fare adjustments you guys are considering and just why it's taken so long. I mean, I know some of other transit boards like Washington, D.C. voted on changes this summer. So what has the MTA been kind of waiting for on that?
Well, I mean, look, Danielle, in fairness, you don't want to overlook that we broke the tradition of raising fares for the first time in 10 years. And that was a big deal. Because of COVID, because we were inviting people back, we didn't want to raise the fare. That's a huge thing. Number two is our focus, honestly, is right now is on fares to make sure that the low-income people, the essential workers, people who were most impacted by COVID, that they can afford to participate in the rebound of the economy and the return to work and all that good stuff that's happening. And third, we don't want to do something off the cuff, which we then have to take away or change or whatever. New York is, we get about $8 billion a year in fare revenue. It is the lifeblood of our budget. We are in a serious hole economically, even after the COVID relief came from Washington. We're looking at $1.5 billion deficit a couple of years down the road. So we don't want to be taking actions with fares casually. What we elected to do is to forego the fare increase, to make sure the focus on the low-income riders and that they get a discount, and to study the issue so we understand how to match a new fare structure using Omni. By the way, buried the lead. Omni. We got all of the subway stations outfitted and the buses outfitted with Omni during COVID. So we now have a new tool for delivering maybe a more flexible or creative fare structure. We're going to try to figure out how to marry that capacity to the new patterns of ridership that are emerging post-COVID. Okay?
All right, thanks, Jano. Great to see everybody here and on Zoom. Have a great afternoon.